Chapter 33. Sillin recalled the scene of Mo Hung assembling the parts at the train station. The strength of each finger, the angle of contact, the accuracy. After glancing at the pile of parts he had chosen, Sillin did not move his eyes away from the parts in his hands. Although his eyes barely moved, Sillin could always immediately reach for the correct parts for the next step. At first, Sillin's speed was slow, but after familiarizing himself with the finger control and estimating the assembly accuracy, Sillin's hands began to move faster. In his office, Mo Hung watched Sillin's assembly movements. He was so excited that his whole body began to tremble. He stood up from his chair, enlarged the screen, and looked at the artistic assembly on the screen. The further he went, the faster Sillin's assembly speed became. Not only did the accuracy not decrease, it even showed signs of increasing. Mo Hung stared at the screen and said to the computer, "Analyze overall accuracy." Scanning, overall accuracy reached 97% of theoretical value. Overall accuracy reached 98% of theoretical value. Overall accuracy reached 99% of theoretical value. Overall accuracy reached 99.2% of theoretical value. Overall accuracy reached 99.3% of theoretical value. Overall accuracy reached 99.5% of theoretical value. In the end, the overall accuracy reached 99.95% of theoretical value. Every step after that reached 99.95%. Whether Sillin was assembling one part or several at the same time, the accuracy was still 99.95%. The overall accuracy was calculated by bringing the various parameters obtained after the scan into the technical formula. The higher the overall accuracy, the closer the assembly person was to the legendary point. In the workshop, the pile of parts was assembled into components and parts by Sillin. Then, Sillin assembled the components and parts. He did not even need to test the circuit to be sure that there would be no mistakes in such assembly. It was definitely an excellent assembly. In the 9th minute, Sillin finished assembling and pressed a button on the assembly machine. The machine was half an arm tall. Other than its bottom, which was used for stability, most of its upper part began to unfold like petals. It was like a flower bud was blooming, bringing with it a crystal-like music. It made people feel as if after a long wait, they had slowly walked out of the darkness and welcomed the first ray of light. Sillin finally understood why so many engineers were obsessed with these things. Looking at the completed machinery, the raw joy in his heart was so touching. Sillin sat cross-legged on the ground. Amidst the flowing music, he stared at the machines in front of him in a daze. He watched as they opened and closed, then continued to bloom and close, just like a cycle. It was only when Mo Hung opened the door that Sillin came back to his senses. Mo Hung walked up to Sillin and sat down. "Sillin, do you know about the golden point?" Sillin shook his head. Many of the contents of the first-year curriculum were not mentioned in depth, and the books that Sillin had read in the past did not mention it either. Many books don't mention the golden point because it only exists in the minds of people in our circle. The correct parts, the correct position, and the most perfect assembly precision in the shortest time. The point that satisfies these conditions is called the golden point. As he spoke, Mo Hung displayed the results of the computer's calculations when Sillin was assembling. Sillin looked at the final 99.95% and frowned. None of the final stages had improved. Mo Hung pointed at the final 99.95% and said, "When this number becomes 100%, you will have reached the golden point." "You are very good, Sillin. I can see that you haven't come into contact with these things often, but to be able to reach 99.95% is much better than some of the teachers in 7 Lights. Have you reached the golden point, sir?" Sillin looked at Mo Hung. When he spoke of this, Mo Hung's tone suddenly turned weathered. No one in the entire GAL has reached it. We have always been approaching the golden point, but no one has reached it." Some people say that the golden point is just a theoretical limit that is impossible to reach, but I have always believed that the golden point can be reached. Silen lowered his head and looked at the machines that were still blooming and closing in front of him. He listened quietly to Mo Heng's narration. There were many things that could not be learned from books. After Mo Heng explained a few things about the golden point, he continued to sigh. I am already old, and the will is willing but the strength is insufficient. Even if I know what I should pay attention to when I assemble and where I can improve, my hand speed and control cannot reach the state I expected. Mo Heng slapped his knee and sighed as if he wanted to vent all the regrets in his heart. He glanced at Silen, who still had his head lowered. This bastard kid actually has no reaction at all. Work harder. Mo Heng let out another sigh, this time carrying even more of the sadness of a hero past his prime. I will never be able to reach a higher point in my life, and the saddest and most helpless thing is that I have no successor. My son chose to join the military, and I didn't have any students that I was particularly satisfied with when I was a teacher in my early years, unlike some of the old fellows in the alliance who were lucky enough to meet a good disciple. Sigh, this is fate. If only I had met someone as talented as you earlier. While sighing, Mo Heng's eyes drifted towards Silen. The latter's head was still lowered, and he did not say a word. His expression could not be seen either. Mo Heng cursed in his heart. You little bastard, I've already said it so clearly, can't you at least show some reaction? Logically speaking, shouldn't you be recommending me excitedly? How can you be so stupid instead of treasuring such a good opportunity? Stupid as hell. Wooden head. It seems that old Mr. Mo has forgotten that he was just praising the so-called wooden head just now. Seeing that Silen was unable to get anything out of him, Mo Heng was furious. Can't you at least show some reaction, kid? Silen found it funny. Mo Heng's hurry up and become my disciple expression and the intense gaze that occasionally glanced at him made it hard for Silen to not know what Mo Heng was thinking. However, as a hunter, he would not stay in Seven Lights for long. He would leave once the mission was over, and Duan Silen would disappear from everyone's sight. What should he do then? About that, there are so many specially recruited students. Don't talk to me about specially recruited students. Those who don't meet my requirements are under the names of other instructors, and their direct instructor isn't me either. Under Mo Heng's intense gaze, Silen rubbed his forehead and said, there are a lot of professional knowledge that I don't know, and since I've taken so many courses, I need to get my credits. I don't have too much extra time. Before Silen could finish, Mo Heng waved his hand and said, those courses are all for show and don't have much practical use. Attending those courses is a pure waste of time. I'll just give you credits straight away, and I bet those great instructors won't dare say anything. Silen sweated on the inside. Vice Headmaster Mo, please don't say this outside, or the teachers and students of Seven Lights will hold a grudge against you. How about it? Are you going to be my disciple or not? Seeing that Mo Heng's eyebrows were showing signs of becoming more and more vertical, Silen considered for a moment and finally said, how about this, I'll be your intern for now, and we'll talk again if you're satisfied with my performance. What do you think? I don't want an intern or anything, it sounds awful. I'll just be a research assistant. Alright, I'll be a research assistant if you say so. Silen didn't know that for many people like Mo Heng, a research assistant was a disciple. Therefore, without Silen's knowledge, Mo Heng had directly equated a research assistant with a disciple. Mo Heng was overjoyed. He grabbed Silen's face and said, with me, the head of the research division, teaching you personally, what else do you have to be dissatisfied with? Right now you're taking advantage of me, and you're still pretending to be obedient. Yes, I'm pretending to be obedient, Silen allowed Mo Heng to pull both sides of his face and shake it. Sigh, why does this old man like to pull people's faces? It's almost swollen. Silen didn't know that Mo Heng's son, the general of the Gal army, had always carried baby fat on his face before he entered a high military academy at the age of 15. Chapter 34. On the same day, Mo Heng changed the access control system of the research institute. Silan was the only person who could enter the research division with a red card, and Silan had the right to enter many places that even the specially recruited fourth years were not allowed to enter. It was a good thing that most of the people in the research institute stayed in the research division, or else Silan's receiving vice headmaster Mo's favor would be known by many people. Many of the first-year classes that Silan had chosen were approved by Mo Heng directly. Since the vice headmaster had given the go-ahead, the great instructors did not dare to say anything. Mo Heng had even specially allocated a personal workshop for Silan, so Silan basically only moved between the research division workshop, the training division and the dormitory. Since he did not attend many classes and his appearance rate was low, Silan basically had no sense of existence to most of the students in Seven Lights. For the past few days, Mo Heng had told Silan a lot of things about machinery, and it had benefited him greatly. His overall accuracy had increased to 96%. Please do not underestimate this 1%. There were only a handful of people who could achieve a galaxy's overall accuracy of 97% like Mo Heng, and they were all famous authoritative figures like Mo Heng in the League of Stars. There were hundreds of people who knew about 96%, and there were even more people who had an overall accuracy of 95%, ranging from thousands to tens of thousands of people. The further one went, the harder it became to improve. Many people might not even be able to achieve a 1% increase after 95%, even if they worked their entire lives. Only those who could achieve a general accuracy of 99% could be considered a high-end talent. Those who could not reach this standard basically had no right to speak in this circle. The instructors in Seven Lights machinery field were all above 99%, and the great instructors would achieve 96%. Therefore, Mo Heng was quite proud of Silan's improvement. He was proud of his wise decision to pull Silan over from the hands of those trash instructors, and he was even more proud of the fact that he finally had an excellent disciple. If those instructors knew that they were trash in Vice Headmaster Mo's heart, who knew if they would vomit blood in anger? There was one time when Silan went to look for Mo Heng, and Mo Heng was communicating with God knows who. He was so proud of himself that he was just short of cocking his tail. Mo Heng was very proud of his disciple, so he showed it by pinching Silan's face more and more often. Silan felt that his face was starting to grow fat. On this day, Silan was assembling the parts that Mo Heng had given him in the workshop. Mo Heng had gone on a business trip. The so-called business trip was to leave Planet 7 luminaries, but no one knew where he went. However, before Mo Heng left, when he assigned a task to Silan, his face was glowing as if he was looking forward to something. The way he looked at Silan also became more and more kind, making Silan's hair stand on end. After interacting with Mo Heng for a long time, Silan also knew that when this minister showed this kind of smile, he was definitely thinking of some rotten idea in his heart. In fact, Mo Heng was visiting an old friend and showing off in passing. Silan's hand speed was very fast. There was a computer at the side that recorded the entire process and calculated the overall accuracy. Every time he assembled a complete machine, Silan had to write an assembly report and write down some of his ideas. This was something that Mo Heng had especially emphasized, and it was something that every person in the research division had to do. The people of the research division could not just blindly follow what others said. They had to have their own ideas. This was something that Mo Heng had said when he was the minister. Silan felt that he could increase his speed even further while maintaining his accuracy. Time was life. It was a very simple saying that even children would grow calluses from hearing it. However, as hunters roaming the galaxy, they all had a very high level of awareness. Whether it was man-made or other accidents, if some important part of a warship malfunctioned and was not repaired, the hidden threat of everyone on the warship dying in less than a 10,000th of a second would constantly increase. This was not to say that Scylla was very noble. Only those with ability would be quickly accepted by hunter regiments and be able to go further in the universe. For the vanguard, and more so for himself, having this kind of awareness would give him a better chance of survival. After Scylla was done equipping the machine, he looked at the data on the recorder and picked up the report book to summarize. He wrote down his thoughts and experiences on it. It was at this moment the doorbell rang. Judging from the rhythm of the bell ringing, Celine had already guessed who it was. After the door opened, a head poked in. Seeing that Scylla was writing a report and not assembling the machine, a pair of bright eyes immediately curved into a smile. Good thing you didn't assemble the machine. I was afraid that I would disturb your work at this time. A beautiful girl with a naive smile walked in. It was the girl who had commented on Scylla and the others with Fu Luo on the teaching building. You came at the right time. I just finished assembling, said Scylla. This girl was also one of the research division's specially recruited students from the Design Institute. Her name was Ling Long, 16 years old, and she was also a first-year student. She seemed to have some background, but many people did not know what her background was. They only knew that many of the great instructors in the research division treated her well. After Scylla came to the research division, he ran into Ling Long by chance and was dragged away by her to ask about the battle between Scylla and Knight in the training room that day. Since then, Ling Long would come to Scylla whenever she was free. She said that the other people in the research division were boring, but she got along quite well with Scylla. At the time, Ling Long said this in the research division's cafeteria. Moreover, she did not lower her voice, so a bunch of people around them heard it and looked at Scylla with strange and ambiguous gazes. One was a famous elven beauty in the research division, and the other was the chief Mo Heng's favorite student. They were a perfect match. Scylla only brushed off the ambiguous gazes with a smile. He knew very well that Ling Long might look very innocent, but she actually hid her true self very well. She was definitely not as naive as she appeared on the surface. Moreover, on the first day Scylla and Ling Long ate together in the cafeteria, Mo Heng told him to keep his distance from Ling Long if possible. Scylla could also see that Mo Heng's attitude towards Ling Long was warm but distant. As for the reason, Mo Heng did not want to explain, and Scylla would not ask. Ling Long touched the machine that Scylla had just assembled. While curious about the machine that Scylla had assembled, she said, Scylla, someone's treating us to a meal at the institute. It's a big shot. He just had a son and is preparing a big meal to celebrate. Everyone in the institute can bring their friends. How about it? Do you want to go? Are you asking me to go and get free food? Scylla was still writing the report in his hand. He smiled. Ling Long looked at Scylla and blinked. It's not the first time anyway. Last time, someone from the Communications Institute treated us to a meal. Didn't we go and get free food too? Let's go. As she spoke, Ling Long elbowed Scylla. Scylla was about to speak when his communicator suddenly rang. I'm sorry. Excuse me for a moment. Scylla walked to a rest cubicle in the workshop. The people outside would not be able to hear their conversation here. The caller was Knight. Normally, Knight would not call during Scylla's working hours, but after seeing the IIT symbol on the display, Scylla immediately avoided Ling Long and answered the call indirectly. It meant urgent. What is it? Scylla said. Scylla, there's something to do. On the display, Knight looked very excited. After holding back for so long, he could finally go all out. Tell me. Scylla knew that a mission that could cause such a huge reaction from Knight must not be simple. Knight straightened his face and asked, Do you know about Seven Lights Asteroid Experimental Base? I do. There were a few asteroids not far away from planet Seven Lights, and on them were the experimental bases built by Seven Lights. Each asteroid corresponded to an experimental base, and it was clear just how big Seven Lights' investment was. It was because some experiments were too dangerous to be carried out on 7 lights, such as large-scale communication interference, high-risk biochemical virus experiments, large-scale radiological weapons research and so on. That was why an extraterrestrial experimental base was built. Right now, C.I. Jincheng was doing his research on one of the asteroids where a communication base was built. Something happened to the biochemical virus base. Uncle Hua did not explain the specifics. This is 7 Lights' top secret. This time, the people from the security team and the training division who were sent over from the military have joined the operation team. At first, Uncle Hua did not plan to allow students to participate, but after some students applied multiple times, he only allowed those with excellent results to join. The rest are off the table. There were only 4 grades in the military field, and there were no grades 5, 6, or 7. If one's results were good during the 4 years, they would be recommended into the military. Normally speaking, there were very few people like this. Come to think of it, there are 2 people from the 2nd grade, and 3 people from the 3rd and 4th grade respectively. Originally, none of us 1st graders were allowed to participate, and I couldn't change Uncle Hua's mind even after blocking him at his door for an entire day. It was only after I contacted my grandfather that he added my name into the operation team. As for that Pride kid, he can't do it. His family doesn't allow him to go. However, I'm sure that guy won't give up so easily. Right now, he's either trying to convince his 2nd brother Ji Feihang, or find a way to contact his grandfather. Only these 2 people will agree to it. Knight said gloatingly. As the director of the training division, Huan Neil knew very well who Knight and Pride were. If the mission wasn't dangerous enough, Huan Neil would not be so resolute. So, Silan, are you interested in joining? Knight asked. Sure, I'm looking forward to it. Silan said with a smile. His hands were a little itchy after not moving for a long time. Alright, I'll go tell Uncle Hua directly. You should come over immediately. There's a preliminary preparation before the operation. After ending the communication, Silan came out and smiled apologetically at Exquisite. Something came up, I can't go get free food. Exquisite's little nose wrinkled as she drew on the ground with the tip of her foot. Alright, I'll go eat 2 portions myself. I'll be going first. After Exquisite left, Silan swiftly finished the report that he had almost finished writing and began to tidy up the things inside the workshop. 5 minutes later, he picked up his backpack and left on a hoverboard. In a room inside the research division, Exquisite watched Silan's back on the monitor as he hurriedly left on a hoverboard. She frowned. She turned on the communicator in her hand and dialed a number. The call was quickly connected. Exquisite's frown grew deeper and deeper as she listened to the report from the other side. Chapter 35. When Silan arrived at the training division, Knight had already told Huan Neil about Silan's participation. However, Huan Neil only allowed Silan to join the preliminary list. It wasn't just Silan. All 10 7 Lights students had to go through the preliminary. If they couldn't pass, they couldn't participate in this operation. After all, they were just students and not soldiers. Their overall qualities must meet the standards. Normal test results and real battlefield results were different. While the 11 students were preparing for the preliminary test, Pride ran over with a communicator and passed it to Huan Neil excitedly. Huan Neil had a bad feeling at the time. He took the communicator and walked into the office to answer the call. After a while, he came out looking a little constipated. Looking at Pride, who was holding his chin up and criticizing Knight, Huan Neil felt that his future was bleak. And so, Pride joined in as well. The first event of the preliminary selection was shooting. This time, the guns that were given to everyone were different from the ones that were usually used in training. The bullets were slightly larger, and the speed at which they were shot was slightly slower. However, the target's movement speed was not slow, and it was very aggressive. Everyone was wearing protective clothing. There was a sensor on the preliminary protective clothing, and the maximum number shown on the sensor was 10. If the number dropped below 5 after shooting, they would be eliminated. Therefore, this preliminary test tested the students' shooting ability, reaction ability, adaptability, and so on. At the same time, the students also realized that this operation was different and vaguely guessed something. As long as there was fear in their hearts, they wouldn't be as calm and clean when responding. The effect of this kind of shooting was very obvious. The number of shots, hit rate, and the number of points deducted were all displayed on the screen outside the testing field. The soldiers of the training division and the police division who were getting ready could all see it. This was a group operation. Without a certain level of strength, the soldiers wouldn't acknowledge you. Forget about whether or not they would trust you with their backs, they wouldn't feel at ease even if they fought together. The 10 people were divided into 10 different parts of the testing field. The total number of targets in each place was 1,000, and the first to eliminate the targets within the specified time was considered the winner. Silen was inside the testing field. He walked into the entrance after tidying up his equipment. The lighting inside the field was dim, and the environment simulation was a dark and damp atmosphere. He could clearly feel something stirring in the dark. Whoosh! A black shadow the size of a medium-sized dog rushed over. Silen raised his gun, and with a bang, the black shadow shattered and disappeared. Then there were 2 more, then 4, then 8. After getting used to the speed of the bullets and the recoil of the guns, even though there were more and more targets, things were still going smoothly. The further he went, the more black shadows there were, and the stronger their attacks were. Several times, they brushed past Silen. Fortunately, Silen reacted quickly, or else he would have been attacked. While dodging the sudden attacks, he also had to shoot at the targets. As long as he didn't let the targets approach in groups, there would be a gap to dodge. As long as there was such a gap, Silen would be able to make the fastest and most convenient response. Strangely, Silen's heart was strangely calm. There was no fear, no anxiety. It was as if he was eating a bowl of noodles. All he did was look at the noodles in the bowl, pick them up with his chopsticks and eat them. That was all. At the same time, everyone had their own reactions to the 10 people's battle on the display outside the testing field. There were 2 students who were affected by the atmosphere inside the field when they entered, and a trace of fear grew in their hearts. Add to that the change in their guns and the miscalculation of the bullet's speed, they didn't last long before they were attacked. 5 minutes later, the number on the protective suit's sensor had dropped to 5, and it was still dropping. Huanil ordered his men to get the 2 people out immediately. There was no longer any need for them to continue. The 2 people who were eliminated not long after the preliminaries took off their protective helmets. Their faces were ashen and dejected. There were instructors guiding them from the side. As the test continued, another 3 people were eliminated, and only 5 people were left inside. The first person to eliminate all the targets within the given time was still Knight. Knight's expression was calm when he came out. He had been training like this since he was young, and he believed that Pride had done the same. That was why Knight only looked at Silen's display after he came out. Pride also came out not long after Knight came out. Pride was a little unconvinced when he saw Knight, but he still raised his chin and snorted. Silen was the 3rd person to come out. He had gathered all the data he needed, and he also predicted that Knight and Pride should have finished their tests and were waiting outside. That was why there was no need to drag things out any longer. He swiftly eliminated the last few dozen targets and walked out. Other than the 3 of them, there were 2 other students who made it past the allotted time. But at the very least, their protective suit points hadn't dropped below the passing line, so they were considered to have passed. Knight, Pride, and Silen's results were excellent, and the other 2 students passed. After the preliminaries, the next test was the antibody and allergy test. The 5 students who passed the preliminaries were injected with a small amount of serum antibodies. As long as their bodies could accept it and didn't have an allergic reaction, they were considered to have passed and could board the transport together with the others who were ready to depart. It seemed that the targets they had to eliminate this time were not only highly offensive, but also poisonous. Silen thought as he analyzed and injected the antibodies into his body. After the serum antibodies were injected, Silen deduced the antigen based on the antibodies. Combining it with the environmental conditions of the test field and the relevant data of the target, Silen was certain that the target this time was a rodent. What kind of rodent was a rodent that had high reproductive ability, preferred dark places, and was widely used in biochemical experiments? A rat. If it really was the size of the target in the test field, then Silen had never seen such a big rat before. After the antibody and allergy test, the good news was that none of the 5 students were allergic. The situation was urgent, and there was no time to give the 5 students any other instructions. When all the equipment was ready, the 5 students had also finished their tests and were very reluctantly brought onto the transport by Huanil. The relevant matters would be explained on the warship. One transport after another transported the soldiers and students to the warship docked at the spaceport. When he saw the warship, Knight whistled, a military warship armed with heavy weapons and equipped with a high-end Sentinel defense system. It looks like the situation this time is pretty serious. But since we haven't mobilized any troops, it shouldn't be too serious even if it's serious. After entering the warship, everyone on the warship, be it the operation members or the warship's pilot, were injected with more antibodies than the allergy test. After the injection, each member was even given 2 antibody serums. If the injected serum didn't work when the time came, the other 2 serums would be used. Chapter 36. While the warship was flying, Huanil began to introduce the mission. A 3-dimensional map of the planet was displayed on the huge screen, and the distribution of the base was displayed on it. Half a year ago, the biotech base discovered that one of the mice had gone missing when they were dealing with the failed and presumed dead mice. There was a hole in the sealed cabin, and no clues could be found even after much investigation. 20 days ago, an abnormal situation occurred at the waste treatment plant on the other side of the planet. 3 workers went missing, and there were bloody pieces of work clothes and claw marks on a few instruments. Similar situations often occurred around the treatment plant in the following period of time. 10 days ago, the base sent out a patrol squad to investigate. Half a day later, the entire squad's vital signals disappeared one after another. Communication was fruitless. Huanil switched images. The image was of a black mouse that was half a meter long, not counting its tail. He continued, after that, the patrol squad was mobilized in large numbers and found the cause 3 days ago. It was this black mouse that caused the current dire situation. Through Huanil's introduction, everyone learned that these black mice had very strong vitality. In the base, the confirmation of a mouse's death was very strict. There was a time limit, and it could only be confirmed dead if there were no signs of life for 24 hours. Moreover, it was sealed at super low temperatures while being sent to the treatment plant. Normally speaking, even a living mouse would freeze to death at -80 degrees. They also had to go through another vital signs inspection to ensure that there were no mistakes. However, that lab mouse managed to bite through the sealed cabin and escape successfully. It was obvious how strong these mutated mice were. The black mouse that escaped back then had been experimented on with strengthening drugs, and had mutated during ultraviolet sterilization and super low temperature transportation. After it escaped the base, it endured the magnetic force and radiation outside and mutated once more, becoming what it was today. Under the great sacrifice of the base's patrol squad, we finally brought back a living, immature black mouse. The antiserum you injected was provided by the base personnel, but these black mice mutate very quickly. I don't know how effective the antiserum will be when the time comes, so I'll give everyone a heads up here. Don't think that you're not afraid just because you've been injected with the antiserum. Huanil said seriously. After the introduction, Huanil divided the 5,000 operatives into 10 teams. The 5 students were inserted into 5 of the teams. Pride and Knight's team captains were Gerard and Huanil respectively. These 2 were personally led by the heads of the security team and training division. He couldn't be at ease leaving them to someone else. Scylla was assigned to the 7th team. Everyone tidied up their equipment and gathered together in an hour. The 5 students put their equipment together, and while they were organizing their equipment, they chatted about their thoughts. Hard was one of the 2 who had passed the preliminary test. He was a forthright person and soon started chatting with Knight. Say, there was only one lab rat that escaped. How did it develop into a large-scale rat infestation? Hard said. Neil had also mentioned this question before, but the answer remained unanswered even now. So now everyone was just guessing. He went out to look for a female rat. Serd, the last of the 5, said. Serd might not be as forthright and straightforward as Hard, but he was still a straightforward person. He was Hard's childhood friend, and his father served in the military of one of the 10 trade sectors. Bullshit, there are no living things outside the base. The magnetic field effect is strong, and there's also radiation. Even if there are creatures, they would have been cleaned up during the construction of the base. Knight said as he put on his combat uniform. In that case, our target is very difficult to deal with. Serd sighed. Don't go if you're afraid of death. Pride said with disdain. Serd didn't mind either. After being in the training division for so long, everyone knew this little young master's temper. What do you think, Scylla? Knight asked. Scylla adjusted the tools in the backpack at his waist. The magnetic field on many asteroids was unstable, and subspace containers were unusable. In the end, he still had to rely on himself to carry them. What do I think? I don't have any, but I do have some suggestions. Oh. Tell me. Knight said curiously. Don't think about how many mutated black rats we're going to kill, but how we're going to retreat in one piece. Before Scylla could finish, Pride snorted disdainfully, coward. Alright, I'm a coward. I don't want to become the shit of those black mutated things. Just like those workers at the waste treatment plant. In the end, only a few bloody rags were left behind, and even their bones were dragged away to feed their descendants. Don't be an alarmist. Pride roared. It had to be said that Scylla's words did make their hairs stand on end. Actually, it's fine as long as we get rid of them. We have weapons in our hands. Serd raised the gun in his hand. No, I just think that the situation might be much more serious than we imagined. The Black Rats group attacks might be even more concentrated than during our primary test. Also, they're intelligent, and they don't just move according to a set program. They have teeth that can bite through sealed lab cabins and sharp claws. Moreover, their saliva is poisonous, and they carry animal viruses on the surface of their bodies, Scylla said solemnly. This wasn't Scylla exaggerating, but obtained through analysis. Scylla had even taken into account the radiation energy of the asteroids and many other parameters to analyze the mutated frequency of the black rats. But looking at the members of this operation, as long as the drugs on the bullets were effective, and the mutated black rats were eliminated thoroughly enough, they should be able to handle it. The reason why the guns were different, the reason why the bullets were bigger, heavier, and slower than the training guns was because every bullet was specially made and contained drugs. The bullets would explode when they entered the mutated black rats' bodies, and the drugs would quickly and thoroughly kill them once they spread out. At the same time, the drugs could also be sprinkled on the mutated black rats around them to reduce their mobility. Pride still wore a look of disdain on his face, but he had already memorized Scylla's suggestion in his mind. Who would go against their own life? He didn't want to become the shit of those black and swarthy things. After the warship arrived outside the asteroid and docked with the space station, Neil and Gerard led a few people to further understand the situation. The rest of the personnel were on standby. It didn't take long before Neil and Gerard came over solemnly. They explained the new information they had just received to everyone. An hour ago, the black rats had attacked the base from underground. Only the center of the base was the sturdiest underground, and it would take some time before they could break through this layer of defense. However, there wasn't much time left for everyone. Many of the base's flight and communication equipment had been gnawed away. Right now, there were several hundred researchers trapped in the base's center, and a dozen of them were heavily injured. The few antiserum they had injected into their bodies were completely ineffective, and the central lab was currently preparing the corresponding antiserum. But no one dared to imagine how many more unknown toxins were waiting behind. As for the edge of the base, it had already fallen. Team 1 to 8 will be responsible for cleaning, starting from the area around the base's center. Team 9 will be responsible for protecting the engineers and repairing the base's defense system. Team 10 will assist the trapped researchers in escaping, medical backup. Huan swiftly issued one order after another. He only arranged the work of each team. As for how each team was arranged, he believed that his men would not disappoint him. In truth, Huan really wanted to arrange Night and Pride into the last two teams, but he also knew that the two ancestors probably wouldn't listen to such an arrangement. The seventh team Silen was in was divided into 5 teams by the captain. Each team had 100 people, and each team was further divided into 10 smaller teams, advancing as a unit. The first 8 teams of the 10 teams went first, and the 8 armed carriers landed around the base's center in 8 different directions. Chapter 37. While on the aircraft, Silen had seen the scene below on the display screen. There were many mutated black mice crawling on the surface of the base, and more were crawling out of the base one after another. These black mice came in all shapes and sizes. The smallest was only about 20 centimeters long, while the bigger ones were more than a meter long, not including the length of their tails. After approaching the center of the base, the aircraft slowly descended. The black mice below weren't afraid of the arrival of the aircraft, but instead became even more excited, as if they had seen food. Since there were many places in the base that couldn't be detected by the detectors, they couldn't predict how many black mice there were below. However, looking down from the aircraft, all they could see were dense black dots. In just half a year, a single mouse had grown into such a large number. It was clear that the speed of their reproduction wasn't something normal mice could compare to. The base's isolation layer has been activated. We can begin operation. Over. Roger. Over. Shoot, the captain of the 7th squad switched the number on his communicator. All squads, get ready. 10-second countdown for the infrasonic weapon begins. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire. The sound waves that human ears couldn't hear were emitted from the aircraft, and the originally excited and lively mutated black mice suddenly became restless. The faster ones had already begun to flee, while the slower ones were becoming slower and slower. This was an infrasonic weapon made according to the natural frequency of the black mouse's internal organs provided by the research base. Although it was effective, it wasn't as good as expected. However, at least it was effective. After the infrasonic attack stopped, the number of black mice around the center of the base had decreased significantly. The mutated black mice that remained there were still a little sluggish, and their consciousness was hazy. Taking advantage of this gap, ropes were lowered from the aircraft parked at low altitudes. Operatives wearing combat uniforms and carrying guns followed the ropes and landed on the ground. The 10 members of the team quickly formed a formation and began to deal with the target as they advanced forward. The flying bullets pierced through the air at high speed and exploded inside the mutated black mouse's body, blasting its internal organs to pieces. A large hole appeared on the half-meter-long mutated black mouse's body, and it fell to the ground dead without even twitching. Its black fur and red blood began to dehydrate under the effects of the drugs carried by the bullets. In less than a minute, the entire mutated black mouse had turned into a pile of powder. Silen had been assigned to Shoot's squad, the captain of the 7th squad, probably to take care of him as a student. However, a warrior was not a babysitter. Shoot did not expect Silen to achieve anything, but at least he had to have the ability to protect himself. In the 10-man formation, Silen was in a relatively safe position. He was the backup support, but it didn't take long for the others to realize that this teenage student was definitely a ruthless one. Silen's firing speed was very fast. By the time the others had fired their first 2 shots, Silen had already fired his 3rd shot. Moreover, he had fired all 3 shots consecutively, and all of them had hit their targets. Most importantly, the black mice that he had killed were all relatively large and fast mutated black mice. This was enough to raise eyebrows. In the time it took for a squad member to reload, Silen had practically taken over all the firepower support and support from the other squad members. The squad members didn't even notice when Silen had reloaded. They only heard the continuous gunshots. With this kind of firing speed, not to mention the endurance of the body, they didn't even have the time to aim, right? Since a student could perform as well as a warrior, Silen was quickly accepted by the squad. The others also began to relax and focus on their own attacks. With their comrades behind them and this very capable kid, they didn't have to worry about anything. At the space station outside the asteroid, a man wearing a military uniform with a lieutenant general epaulet stood in the command room and watched the cleanup of the base displayed on the screen. He was sent here by Marshal Fiegler, and he had even received a communication from a certain political figure in the League of Stars before he departed. It could be said that he was shouldering a heavy responsibility, and both Knight and Pride squads had been specially assigned personnel to ensure the safety of the 2 young masters. This could be considered a special privilege, and he wouldn't say it even if he had any thoughts. That being said, the trip this time could be considered fruitful. The other 3 students who Neil mentioned had performed pretty well, especially that kid named Silen. He wasn't any worse than the few influential figures in Sector C's military academies. At the moment, the lieutenant general didn't seem to notice much change in Silen's emotions. He cooperated well enough, was calm enough, decisive enough, and accurate enough. Looking at the screen, the lieutenant general wondered if he could recruit this kid into his unit after this operation. It would be a waste of talent to leave him in 7 lights. As they continued to advance and entered the interior of the base, their movements were slightly obstructed. The cables were damaged, the generators were nowhere to be found, the energy system was malfunctioning, the energy box was unusable, and the places without windows were pitch black. Moreover, there were many places in the base's internal laboratories that were resistant to infrared and X-ray detection. In order to ensure that every laboratory was cleaned up, the operatives would throw powerful grenades, rodent-repellent bombs, and other things into the laboratories to force the black mice out, and every single one of them would jump out. As the cleanup progressed, the black mice seemed to have sensed the threat from the base and escaped. This was just what everyone wanted. If they could drive these mutated black mice out of the base and into the open space outside the base, then the armed spaceplanes in the air could use their high-energy weapons to clean them up on a large scale. This was because the base they had built with great difficulty must not be destroyed by high-energy weapons unless it was absolutely necessary. Occasionally, a few caves could be seen inside the base. Those mutated black mice were attacking the base from underground. A lot of robots had been sent to scout the area and spray chemicals at the same time to force the mutated black mice out of the ground. After this battle, they believed that the underground construction of the base would advance one step further. After a period of time, the number of black mice inside the base had decreased by a lot. Everywhere the operation squad passed by was covered in gray powder. That was the mutated black mice that had been killed by bullets and turned into powder by the drugs. Silen's senses were very strong. He could sense the 3 mutated black mice behind the experiment table even without looking. The moment they popped their heads out, the bullets that came flying at them would blow off their heads directly. Perhaps it would be difficult for other operatives to see in such a dark environment, but not Silen. There were a few times when Silen had fired his gun before his squad members could even react, and the sound of the bullets hitting the black mice echoed with the gunshot. After he finished inspecting the abnormal life forms in this area, Chute smiled and said, "Done. Captain, this is already the edge of the base, isn't it?" A squad member asked. Although Shoot was also the leader of this squad, the squad members were still used to calling him captain. Almost there. We've already started cleaning up the high-energy weapons outside the base. The rest should be easier. Shoot's tone was relatively relaxed. He looked at Sillin, who was repairing the circuit board of an instrument, and said, "Sillin is pretty good." "Yeah, we're all a little ashamed of ourselves," a squad member said with a smile. Sillin didn't say anything and focused on the work at hand. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. According to his predictions, those black mice shouldn't just be like this. Chapter 38. Shoot did not say anything about Sillin's silence. Sillin had not spoken much since the beginning of the operation. He just thought that the child was too quiet. Young people should be more lively and cheerful. "Sillin, don't worry about that for now. Once we're done with those black mice, there will be specialists who will come and repair the base. We should head to the waste treatment plant on the other side. That's their nest." Shoot looked at the time and said, "Wait, it's done." Sillin turned on the instrument and inputted a series of commands. "What is this?" one of the squad members asked. The words on the instrument had been ground away by the black mice and could not be read clearly. "This should be an instrument that analyzes genes or something," another squad member said. This is a relatively high-end analyzer in the League of Stars right now." Sillin took out a small syringe from his waist pocket and dripped it onto a notch on the instrument. Then, he pushed the notch into the bayonet and inputted a series of formulas on it again. "See, I told you to read more so that you'll know something about any instrument you come across in the future. Otherwise, people will call you illiterate. I'm a soldier. A soldier only needs to know how to fight. What do I need to be educated for?" The squad members laughed and chatted. However, Shoot did not laugh. Sillin's reaction gave him a bad feeling. He had heard from Huanil that Sillin was a very talented person who worked in Seven Lights Research Division a long time ago. Now, it would seem that this kid was truly talented. It took him less than 5 minutes to repair this instrument. His skills were very experienced. However, the blood that Sillin dripped on the instrument should be the black mice's blood, right? When did he do it? How is it? Shoot moved closer and asked. It was because he could not understand the profound things displayed on the screen at all. As expected, being uneducated was a terrible thing. However, just like his subordinate said, soldiers only needed to know how to fight. Their brain memory was limited, and their CPU could not keep up with too many things. Sillin did not answer Shoot's question directly. Instead, he said, "Captain, do me a favor and collect the black mice's blood left in the lab. Try to make it as fresh as possible. Some of the spots were bloodstains left behind by the black mice when they were fighting or when they were injured by the laboratory's defense system. As long as they didn't come into contact with drugs, there wouldn't be too many changes." "Sure." Shoot took a small bag of tubes from Sillin. Each tube contained a sterile cotton swab. Who would have thought that this kid would even bring this thing with him when he was preparing his equipment on the warship? Before long, the 9 of them had gathered 28 blood samples. Sillin found a few solutions in the laboratory. After processing them, he put all 28 of them together and analyzed them at the same time. Looking at the series of data displayed on the screen, he sighed. "Wait for me. I'll go collect another sample. Hopefully, I can find it." "Hey, what's that kid doing?" a team member complained. "I have a bad feeling about this," another person muttered. Sillin looked at a cave entrance, took a few photos, and then jumped into the cave. "Hey, you!" The team member who had followed him over almost had his hair stand on end. That was a rat cave. They couldn't even stretch their fists and legs inside, much less raise their guns. If a black mouse suddenly jumped out from below, they would definitely be waiting for death. Although the vitality detector didn't detect anything, there were too many interference factors in this kind of experimental base. It was common for the detector to malfunction. It was pitch black inside the cave, and the people above could not see what Silen was doing. Silen took off his gloves and placed his hand directly on the cave wall. The virus carried by the black mice had no effect on him. When he touched the cave wall, Silen's mind had already begun to rapidly analyze the information his fingers had come into contact with. The DNA analysis of the tiny hairs, dander, saliva, and other traces left on the cave wall was about the same as the data on the detector. His fingers moved along the cave wall, and suddenly paused when they reached a certain spot. Silen put on his gloves again, took out the cotton swab inside the small tube, and wiped it over that spot. At the same time, he used a carving knife to scrape off a layer there. Shoot and the others finally let out a sigh of relief when they saw Silen come out of the cave. This kid is really, after the sample taken from the cave was analyzed on the detector and compared with the 20 or so samples from before, a series of data was displayed on the screen. It's just as I expected. Silen pointed at the data displayed on the screen and said to everyone, "This is the comparison between the sample I collected from the cave and the 20 or so samples you collected." Some of the data was deduced based on the analysis of genetic material. I won't say much else. In short, we've been tricked. Shoot frowned. Explanation. I'll only say one thing. Silen pointed at a piece of data. The strength of the red and white muscles of the black mice we hunted was at least 5 times weaker than the black mouse that dug the hole. In other words, the black mouse that dug the hole was much stronger than the black mice we encountered, be it in terms of speed or endurance. And this is just an incomplete analysis. The black mouse that dug the hole was a stronger type of black mouse? Shoot asked. Yes. Because the black mice we killed couldn't even scratch through the reinforced protective belt beneath the base. I've checked the holes, and the claw marks on the holes were very clean. They could even scratch through steel plates. If it were the black mice we encountered, they might not be able to dig through it even if we gave them a month. But how long has it been since the hole in the base was dug? The squad members were silent. Yes, how long has it been since the base was attacked? A few hours. Where are the stronger black mice? The waste treatment plant? No, if my guess is correct, their true elites are right below the central area of the base. Shoot was shocked. How is that possible? Aren't they? Shoot originally wanted to say that these black mice couldn't dig through the underground protective layer of the central area, right? But Shoot immediately realized that they might have been wrong from the start. It wasn't that they couldn't dig through. Since there were such strong black mice, no matter how sturdy the underground of the central area was, it wouldn't be able to hold out for long. What are they trying to do? A squad member couldn't help but ask. Revenge. They want revenge. Silen looked in the direction of the central area. The core researchers of the base were there. The black mice that had been killed were only the vanguard of the black mice. The true elites had yet to show themselves. Silen even suspected that the black mouse captured by the research base was purposely captured by the black mice's leader. That was because it wasn't an elite either. Compared to the one that dug the hole, it wasn't on the same level at all. The waste treatment plant used to be their nest because there was water and food there. But now, that place was nothing more than a cover for the operation team to continue wasting ammunition and time. They were very good at making a feint in the east and attacking in the west. In this world, there were far more intelligent races than people could imagine. Why didn't you say anything if you'd expected it? A squad member said angrily. Say. Would you have believed me if I said it without evidence? With Silen's status as a student, neither the military personnel nor the researchers of the base would believe him. Since that was the case, he might as well find evidence first. Silen admitted that he wasn't a benevolent person. He wouldn't do something like being snubbed if he showed kindness to others. The lives and deaths of those people had nothing to do with him. If Mo Heng knew what Silin was thinking, he would probably be so angry that he'd give him a good beating. Chapter 39. After listening to Silin's words, Shoot dialed the communicator and said a few words before passing it to Silin. You can talk to Boss Hua. Silin took the communicator and explained the current situation to Huanil. He also sent over a series of data analyzed by the apparatus. The evidence was convincing enough. Keep all the blood and other samples you've collected. I'll send someone over to collect them. I'll have the other teams collect more samples as well. Huanil also realized the severity of the situation after listening to Silin's report and told Silin some things that needed attention. Alright, I got it. We'll pay attention. Silin suddenly paused while talking to Huanil. He swiftly turned around, raised his gun, and fired 2 consecutive shots. There was no hesitation or time to aim at all. Everything was done in one go. Bang! Bang! On the other side, Shoot was still talking to his squad members. He had already realized the danger when Silin raised his gun, but before he could react, Silin's 2 bullets had flown over. The bullets swept past the tip of Shoot's hair beside his ear. He could still feel the heat from the bomb flying past his face, as well as the burning smell of his hair left in the air by the bullet flying at high speed. It was a black mouse about 2 meters long, excluding its tail. When the first shot hit it, the bullet had only exploded in a small area on its body, and the drugs hadn't quickly permeated its entire body. Therefore, if the second bullet hadn't come right after, it still had the strength to rip Shoot's back in half with a single swipe of its claws. The black mouse that had taken 2 bullets fell to the ground and twitched. Its blade-like claws left a few deep claw marks on the ground. It was obvious that they were much more resistant to the drugs in the bullets than the black mice before them. Before the blood had completely turned to powder, Silin quickly took out a syringe and sucked a bit of the blood on the ground. He put it into a small tube filled with neutralizer and anticoagulant. Under everyone's shocked gazes, he even dug out a piece of the big black mouse's flesh and soaked it in the bag filled with neutralizer. The squad members felt a chill run down their backs. They didn't know if it was because of the black mice or Silin. Didn't this kid know how to do something that made people feel at ease? The black mouse was still twitching and hadn't stopped breathing, but this brat ran over to take its blood and dig out its flesh. Wasn't he afraid that the black mouse would strike again before it died? The black mouse's eyes, which were so red that they seemed to be filled with blood, gradually dimmed and turned black. Finally, it stopped breathing and slowly turned into powder. However, the sharp claws were still intact. Thank you, Shoot said after coming back to his senses. Although he had been talking to his team members, he was still on guard. No one had noticed the big black mouse's approach, and he himself only realized the danger when Silin raised his gun. Although Shoot's back was facing the black mouse, he could still sense that the black mouse was charging at him. It was several times faster than the black mice in front of it, and it was also silent. By the time you noticed it, it was already too late. Huanil's communicator was still on, and from the video settings on the communicator, Huanil had already seen the scene just now. There was no need for further proof. Huanil had truly witnessed the slightly stronger black mice Silin spoke of. If all the black mice under the base were like this, then the consequences would truly be unimaginable. If it wasn't for Silin's reminder, the hidden black mouse elites would have taken the opportunity to kill off the research center and the last 2 teams who went to rescue them while all of their personnel were encircling the mouse nest at the waste treatment plant. He picked up the undamaged black mouse's claw and slashed it across the lab table beside him. The hardened surface of the claw was easily cut open. Holy shit, this thing is so powerful. A team member exclaimed in surprise. This had completely exceeded their predictions. This big black mouse is probably here to patrol and see if the other teams have left. After all, the other teams should have left the base and were preparing to head to the waste treatment plant by now, but we're still here. Silin voiced his speculation. Moreover, the fact that this black mouse could come over safely meant that it wasn't afraid of the rat poison sprayed in the underground tunnel at all. I've already ordered 6 teams to return. I'll leave 2 teams and the weaponized spaceplane there. If they can't handle it, I'll just have the weaponized spaceplane flatten that area with its high-energy cannons. Right now, Neil didn't have the heart to care about the waste treatment plant anymore. The moment he thought of Silen's words, he became restless. On the other side, Neil urgently stopped the 10th squad who was preparing to open the protective shield at the center of the base. At the same time, the engineers who were repairing power supplies and other important equipment under the 9th Squad's protection were hastily brought back to the spaceplane. The base was too dangerous. The samples and data Silen had submitted were immediately processed. Then, Neil gave every team leader a new order to send another machine into the underground tunnel to expand the size of the tunnel. Otherwise, the soldiers wouldn't even be able to move after they went down, and would only become food. But strangely, the deeper they went, the bigger the hole became. There was no need for machines to expand the hole at all. When the machines reached a certain depth, they were clawed and destroyed by the black mice below. But before the machines were destroyed, the detection devices on the machines showed that there were a large number of abnormal life forms below. This confirmed Silen's speculation. However, another question was raised. Why were the holes below so big? Didn't this mean that there were even bigger black mice? There was no conclusion to this question for now. Maybe it was because they had realized something, but the black mice hiding deep below the base had begun to move earlier. Of the 8 squads, some went underground, and some stayed behind at various parts of the base. Because Neil had told them to, every operative fired at least 2 shots at the black mice that crawled out of the hole. Other than the holes that had already been opened in the base, the group of big black mice had opened many more holes away from the operatives' firepower when they charged towards the surface. They were like a group of mad Avengers who didn't care about their own lives at all, and only charged towards the center of the base. Since these big black mice were very fast and had very sensitive senses, there was no doubt that the operative's hit rate had been lowered. Moreover, the operative had to change locations from time to time because there was no telling if a big black mouse would suddenly jump out of the ground if they stayed there. There were already a few people who had been dragged into the hole by the big black mice that had suddenly charged out. They didn't even have the time to scream. Silen's squad went underground. The hole was very dark, but their masks were equipped with night vision devices. After all, there weren't as many jamming devices underground as there were inside the base. The cooperation between the squad members was very good, and there were no casualties for the time being. The firepower was more concentrated inside the underground hole. As they went deeper, the hole grew bigger, and 3 people could walk side by side now. At a fork, the group saw a pool of blood. It wasn't the black mice's, it was human blood. At the same time, they heard a weak cry for help. Chapter 40. There weren't many messy marks around the bloodstains, which meant that there hadn't been an intense battle, but it also meant that those people hadn't been able to put up much of a fight against the attack. Shoot gestured with his hand. Stay alert, cover, and move to the other side to rescue them. Silen crouched down against the wall, took out a small box, and scraped a layer of soil off the wall. The squad members saw Silen's actions, but didn't pay attention to him. They only looked around vigilantly. After all, Silen had done this before, so everyone thought that Silen was taking samples. In truth, what they didn't know was that Silen's real goal wasn't to take samples, but to use this as a cover. He pulled his finger out of the glove at an angle that no one would notice, and touched the wall and the floor to analyze the minute traces. Even the most advanced equipment wasn't as convenient as the chip in Silen's body. The moment he touched it, the feedback from his finger allowed Silen to know what kind of black mice had attacked the operatives here. It was different. It was different from the big black mice that dug holes he had encountered before. It was stronger. Scylla wasn't sure how strong it was, but he had a feeling that those people had encountered the leader of these black mice, which was the mutated black mouse that had escaped from the base. When Shoot found the member who had called for help, he was already on the verge of death and had fallen into a deep coma. Under the illumination of the flashlight, everyone could clearly see that one of the member's legs had been bitten off, and his body was covered in blood. The medic in charge of the squad came over to help him stop the bleeding, but before he could finish bandaging the wound, he had already passed away. "I'm going to kill those bastards." One of the squad members' eyes were bloodshot, and he punched the wall in grief and indignation. The others had similar expressions. Shoot took a deep breath and said, "They're showing off." They could have gotten rid of everyone without a sound, but they just had to leave one heavily injured. He lost too much blood, and the rat poison has already invaded his internal organs. The medic picked up 2 empty tubes. "We've already injected the antiserum into both tubes, but it didn't have any effect. This rat poison is too strong. Captain, there's no signal on the communicator." One of the squad members suddenly shouted. Originally, he wanted to contact the reserve team and report the current situation at the same time, but he did not expect that there would be no signal at all. Every team brought a signal receiver with them when they entered the cave. Every time they reached a certain distance, they would install a receiver on the walls or ceiling of the cave as a disguise. The signal was quite strong just now, but now there was no signal at all. What had happened? Scylla thought to himself. Their intelligence, no, it should be said that their intelligence far exceeded people's expectations. If every team had done their job properly, and the signal receiver had been installed and concealed, but there was still no signal, then either the receiver had broken down on its own, or the black rat leader had dismantled the receiver. The former was unlikely, but the latter was very likely. It sounded incredible. Even if Scylla said it, not many people would believe it. How could a disguised signal receiver be removed? And to tear them all down so thoroughly? Was this a rat or a human? Scylla had never underestimated the black rat leader from the start. The more information he came into contact with, the more Scylla felt that this black rat was very powerful, be it in terms of intelligence or combat ability. Moreover, Scylla was gradually finding the frequency of that sound. Shoot thought for a moment, then took out his soundwave detector and pressed it. The reason why he had not used it earlier was because there was a high chance that the black rats would know their location when they used the soundwave detector. But now, Shoot couldn't care less. He kept feeling that something was wrong. Looking at the image displayed on the detector, Shoot's expression changed abruptly. "Get out of here quickly." They had only taken a few steps when the walls and ceiling of the cave were drilled through, and the black rats rushed over one by one. These black rats had appeared in a very coincidental position, separating Scylla and another squad member from the other 8 people in the same squad. Due to the increasing number of black rats, even if Shoot wanted to rescue them, there was nothing he could do. The distance between the 2 parties was pushed further and further by the black rats. Gunshots rang out incessantly, but these large black rats were not as easy to deal with as the small black rats from before. They were very oppressive. Scylla and the other squad member quickly retreated to the other side of the cave, their guns never stopping. But fortunately, the number of black rats that had appeared was not too high. Scylla and the other squad member fought for more than 10 minutes, and no more black rats came after them. The 2 of them stayed in another cave. They had lost contact with the other 8 people in their squad, and they did not run into any members of the other squads either. Only the sound of their breathing could be heard in the quiet cave. "Looks like we're safe for now." The man smiled. "Yeah." Scylla smiled as well. Pfft. An arrow of blood shot out from the side of the man's neck. The man's eyes were filled with disbelief. He really did not expect Scylla to act so quickly. How could a normal person be on guard against a teammate in a situation like this? When the man said, "We're safe for now," a normal person would let out a temporary sigh of relief and relax their tension, much less when their teammate was right beside them. However, the man's carotid artery was cut by Silen just as he took out his knife. Due to the intense rat extermination exercise just now, his blood flowed quickly, and it did not take long for him to stop breathing due to excessive blood loss. Silen played with the rat claw in his hand and looked at the man on the ground. He let out a few almost inaudible sounds from his mouth. This was the first time Silen had used it after decoding the black rat leader's voice frequency. Silen had been searching for that voice and decoding it ever since he entered this network of deep underground caves. Silen did not linger any longer and left the place. In less than a minute, a couple of black rats would come over and eat that squad member. In a situation like this, Silen would be able to deal with the few threats hidden in the operation team better if he was alone. Ever since he entered Seven Lights, Silen had never overlooked these hidden dangers. Whether it was a student, a researcher, or a soldier, Silen had never let his guard down. Aflon's opponents had actually extended their hands into the military. How interesting, as expected of Aflon's opponents. Silen's performance was very eye-catching when the group had just come down from the armed spaceplane to kill the black rats, but no one would have thought that Silen was also paying attention to the minute changes in every squad member. From these minute changes, Silen was able to guess the hidden dangers. Silen was able to confirm his suspicions through the series of events that followed. In truth, before the black rats had separated them from the other 8 people in the group, Silen had purposely walked a little slower. That person was obviously looking for an opportunity to kill Silen as well. The duo were at the back of the group, and Silen had calculated where the black rats would appear. Silen's speed and the distance between him and the 8 people in front of him were all within his calculations. It might seem like a coincidence that the black rats had separated them from the other 8 people, but it was all within Silen's calculations. Silen did not need a sound wave detector to detect the sound waves coming from the cave walls. A normal person would not be able to sense it at all. Silen was like a multifunctional precision instrument that was analyzing the information around him at all times. He knew that the black rat's arrival was not a coincidence, but the result of the black rat leader's command. Like a human-shaped detector, Silen knew everything that was going on around him like the back of his hand. How many people in the group had just passed through which cave, how many black rats were at which cave entrance nearby, and so on. He knew all of this, which allowed Silen to avoid a lot of trouble. Looking at the buckle of his backpack, the corner of Silen's mouth curled up slightly. The next one should be appearing soon. In front of him was a corner of a cave entrance. Silen slowly walked over, and just as he was about to reach the turning point, the rat claw in his hand shot out like lightning. Pfft! At the corner, a person wearing a combat suit had his throat pierced and was directly nailed to the cave wall. His eyes were also filled with disbelief, and the gun in his hand fell to the ground. This was originally meant to kill Silen. The rat claw's trajectory was in an arc. Not to mention that it was so accurate in an environment like this inside a cave. This was something that the person had not expected. Silen pulled out the rat claw, and just like before, it let out a sound that was difficult for human ears to distinguish. In the following period of time, Silen took care of 3 more people. There was a mini tracking device at the buckle of Silen's backpack. This was installed in the backpack before the equipment was distributed, and it was specially sent to Silen. It was obvious that they had long since prepared to find an opportunity to kill Silen here. However, they did not know that Silen had already detected the tampering on the backpack when he received it. This was the so-called beat them at their own game. After walking in the network of caves for so long, Silen could already clearly feel the number of black rats decreasing. Since Silen had provided blood samples and related data in a timely manner, the operatives were able to make adequate preparations, reduce casualties, and improve efficiency. As Silen walked, he suddenly stopped and turned around. In the darkness, on the other side of the cave, a large black rat nearly 3 meters tall stood there, its red eyes emitting a bloody glow in the darkness. "You finally appeared. I thought you'd keep hiding from me." There was a hint of a smile in Silen's tone. "That thing inside your body, I want it." Chapter 41. Scylla had always suspected that the black rat leader had something on its body that could cause it to undergo such a change. Mutation was one thing, but there would be a period of stability after the mutation. However, this black rat had undergone a second mutation not long after its first mutation, and it had mutated so successfully that its intelligence and combat power seemed to have been accumulated over hundreds of years. He had never heard of such a thing before. A rat that was still strong for hundreds of years, or a one-year-old rat? Who was more intelligent? The answer was obvious. When Scylla was examining the traces left behind by the black mouse, he discovered that there was a strange substance inside its cells. In other words, there might be something inside the black mouse's body that stimulated the cells of every part of the black mouse's body to produce strengthening substances. It wasn't until this black rat appeared that Scylla could clearly feel the special information coming from its body. That information made the chip in Scylla's body very excited, as if it had found its own kind. The huge black rat leader had two pairs of incisors that looked like scythes, and it let out a hissing sound that didn't sound like that of a rat. It had sensed Scylla's presence before, but it didn't attack immediately. It felt that this human gave it a very special feeling, a faint sense of danger, but at the same time, there was a temptation like a delicious meal. Perhaps eating this human would be good for its evolution. After enduring for so long, it finally decided to make its move. The black rat disappeared from where it was, and the next moment, it appeared in front of Scylla. Scylla's reaction wasn't slow either. He had already put his gun and backpack aside, and he faced it with his bare hands. His solidified body collided with the black rat with a dull thud. The instant the black rat's claws swept past, Scylla quickly bounced up and kicked the black rat's neck. Bang! The black rat's neck didn't break, but its head and upper body were knocked to the side by the force of the kick. The stone wall where it was hit caved in, and crushed rock fragments fell to the ground. The rock wall was like tofu under the black rat's claws, and the hole expanded under the black rat's continuous attacks, and stone fragments flew everywhere. After so many encounters, Scylla already knew the location of that thing in the black rat's body. Whoosh, two rat claws swung towards Hei Shu's blood-red eyes. Hei Shu closed his eyes and slightly tilted his head. The two rat claws that were thrown by Scylla hit the corner of Hei Shu's eyes, but they didn't even leave a scratch on Hei Shu's skin. However, the rat's claw that was thrown out as a hidden weapon was only a cover. Scylla's next target was its ear. The second black mouse closed its eyes. Scylla swung his claws at the same time and aimed them at the left and right ears of the mouse. With such speed and strength, if it really shot into the ear, no matter how hard the earlobe was, the inner ear and nerves deep inside the ear canal would be damaged. The big black mouse also knew the consequences of being shot, so it closed its eyes and leaned to the side to avoid the first two mouse claws. At the same time, the black mouse raised its two front limbs and used its sharp claws to deflect the incoming hidden weapons. This was the moment. Scylla jumped diagonally and flew under Hei Shu's front paws. His solidified arm pierced through its abdomen. At the same time, his arms sucked the thing out of Hei Shu's abdomen like a magnet. Then, he quickly jumped away. The entire process happened in the blink of an eye. It was a white crystal ball the size of a fist. It was suffused with a dense white light in the darkness. Holding the white ball in his hand, Scylla could clearly feel the enormous energy coming from it. However, now was not the time to study this white ball. Scylla quickly retreated after obtaining the thing. Only an idiot would fight this big guy head-on. The wound on Hei Shu's abdomen caused by Scylla's arm didn't bleed much. Instead, it immediately began to heal. However, the healing effect wasn't as good as when the white ball was around. The healing speed was slightly slower. Hei Shu went berserk after realizing that the white ball had been taken away for nothing. Its bloodshot eyes turned even redder as it roared angrily. Its two pairs of scythe-like incisors were suffused with extreme anger and killing intent. It didn't care about revenge. It didn't care about the lives of the other black mice. However, it couldn't lose this white ball. All of its reliance, all of its opportunities, all of it depended on this white ball. He Shu chased after Silin like a madman. With every step it took, its long and sharp claws would lift up a large chunk of the cave's stone stratum. He Shu didn't even turn. It simply chose the shortest distance to pursue Silin in a straight line. Its impatience was evident. Many parts of the cave had been destroyed. As He Shu and Silin ran, the path they took gradually began to collapse. The path Silin had chosen didn't have any other operatives. Moreover, He Shu had made a lot of noise, so the nearby operatives were on high alert. When they sensed that the cave was starting to become unstable, they quickly retreated to the surface. Silin had long since formed a clear and complete network of caves in his mind. He knew exactly when he should run to which fork in the road. The path he ran passed through most of the caves. Among them was the place where he had taken care of the hidden assassins. The cave's collapse had buried the last traces. The longer this dragged on, the weaker He Shu felt after leaving the white ball. It grew more and more restless. Unfortunately, the human who had taken its things was also very fast. While running, He Shu let out a long howl. It didn't sound like a rat, but more like those ancient beasts. This howl caused the entire underground network to shake. Even the operatives who were fighting the black mice on the surface could hear it clearly. It sounded like a long, mournful howl amidst the cold wind, or like the demonic voice of an Asura passing through hell. At this moment, all the operatives and researchers who heard this howl felt a cold shiver run down their spines. Just what kind of creature could make such a howl? Just what kind of situation and state of mind did this creature make such a hysterical howl? When this howl resounded, every black mouse on the surface, be it those who were fighting the operatives, those who were hiding somewhere in the base waiting for an opportunity to attack, or those who were about to drill through the last layer of defense at the center of the base, all stopped what they were doing and gathered underground. Even when the operatives fired their guns at them, they remained unmoved. Inform the operatives who haven't come up to the surface to evacuate the caves immediately. Everyone on the surface, be on high alert. Huan Neil roared into the communicator. Although he didn't know what was going on, judging from the voice, it was obvious that the leader was coming. Somewhere inside the underground cavern, a team of operatives was moving forward. They had lost contact with the surface earlier, and their communicators had no signal at all. But seeing that the cavern was growing more and more unstable, the team leader immediately decided to leave first. Otherwise, it would be a waste to be buried here. Especially after they heard that terrifying howl just now, it strengthened their decision to evacuate even more. Team leader, there's a signal. A team member cried out in joy. The closer they got to the surface and further away from the position of the Black Mouse leader, the more signal receivers they had installed earlier remained. It wasn't just this team. The operatives who were evacuating from the surface had also noticed that their communicators had a signal. All underground operatives evacuate to the surface immediately. Evacuate to the surface immediately. Huan Neil's voice rang from the communicator. It was filled with urgency. Retreat. The team leader immediately gave the order. But before they could take 2 steps, they felt a tremor approaching them from afar. Stay alert. All the operatives raised their guns and got ready to fire. However, everyone knew that the number of black mice wasn't something the few of them could withstand with such a loud rumble. Retreat? It was useless. His cavern was very long, and retreating now would only waste their stamina and delay the collision. They hadn't encountered such a large number of black mice when they first entered the underground cavern. Now it looked like the black mice had gathered together and charged at them, and judging from the sound of their running, they didn't bother to conceal their movements at all. They weren't as stealthy as when they fought against them in the dark earlier. Surd was also a member of this team. Right now, he couldn't even be bothered to wipe the sweat off his forehead. He recalled everything he had experienced since he was young, his old dreams, and his ambitious arrival at Seven Lights. Did he regret it? He asked himself. He didn't know. He really didn't know. Right now there was nothing else in his mind except for the feeling he had when he saw the golden military emblem in his dad's study when he was young. Perhaps, from that moment on, he had an obsession in his heart. One day, he would get one for himself, and the name written on it wouldn't be his dad's, but his, Surd's. The black mice were already close, and the squad members could already smell the disgusting stench in the air. For glory! For glory! The squad members followed the team leader's cry and tightened their grip on their guns. Chapter 42. The squad leader had reported the situation and the names of the squad members to Huanil the moment he noticed the abnormality. Because everyone knew that Huanil was powerless to save them even if he wanted to. At the same time, similar situations were happening in other places as well. However, Surd's squad was the first to encounter the black mice returning from the surface. Huanil listened to his squad members breathing and growing louder through the communicator with an unusually heavy heart. At this moment, these people were still alive, and they could still hear their breathing. What about the next moment? The squad members around Huanil were all red-eyed, but they couldn't do anything about it. They couldn't make it in time. Underground, the squad members could already see the black mice appearing at the other end of the tunnel through their night vision goggles. Ready, to, before the squad leader could finish the word, fire, a voice suddenly rang from the communicator. Squad members who encounter a large group of black mice returning from the surface, do not fire if you want to live. Move to the side and stick close to the cave wall. Be careful, do not fire. Silen. It was Silen. The black mice were getting closer and closer, but the squad leader hesitated. Listen to him. Do not fire, move to the side and stick close to the cave wall. On the surface, Knight snatched the communicator from Huanil's hand and roared. The squad leader gritted his teeth, do it. When the squad members stood close to the cave wall, the black mice were already 3 meters in front of them. They had been this close to the black mice before, but that was with weapons in their hands, not like this. When the first black mouse passed in front of them, their hearts almost jumped into their throats. The front teeth, sharp claws, blood-red eyes, and the surging stench caused the squad members' scalps to go numb. They were even prepared to die. However, the black mouse seemed to not see them at all. It was still as fast as before and swept past them with a whoosh. Then another, and another, and another. Surd felt the chilling sensation of the black mice's tough black fur brushing past him. He couldn't tell how shocked he was. This was a black mouse, a real big black mouse, a mutated black mouse that 2 shots might not even be able to kill. They could still feel the murderous aura from their bodies, but, holy shit, they passed just like that. They really passed just like that. He didn't even glance at them. This was definitely the strangest and most frightening thing they had ever experienced in their lives. Only Silen knew that the meaning of the black mice's leader's howl was for all the black mice to stop what they were doing, ignore everything else, and surround Silen with all their might. As long as they had that white ball, they would have a chance to make a comeback. On the other side of the communicator, on the ground, Huanil and the surrounding team members held their breaths as they listened to the sound of the black mice running past them. The image was on, and although the image on the other side could not be seen clearly in the darkness, the red eyes were still relatively obvious. Just looking at the communicator caused their adrenaline levels to increase and chills to run down their spines. One could imagine the feelings of those who had brushed past the black mice on the other side. After the black mice ran over, the sound of tremors also faded away. Knight heaved a sigh of relief. As expected, Silen was no ordinary person. However, when he tried to contact Silen again, he discovered that he couldn't reach him. With this group's example, the other groups who encountered the same situation also did the same. However, it was only when they really did it that they realized just how much courage it took. The cowardly ones would have fainted a long time ago. Inside the cave, the group's backs were almost completely drenched. They were still stuck to the wall, and their bodies were still stiff. They didn't even dare to breathe too loudly. When they came back to their senses, the group members felt a little strange amidst the joy of surviving a disaster. The impassioned and heroic atmosphere in front of them was instantly destroyed. It was like preparing to go to the toilet for a long time only to let out a fart, which made people not know whether to laugh or cry. How complicated their mood was, how complicated. Thank goodness that kid reminded them in time. Otherwise, the group members couldn't help but shudder just thinking about it. However, if they knew that Scylla was the culprit behind the black mice's reintroduction, they would definitely snap Scylla's neck in anger. Scylla, who continued to run, did some calculations and felt that the time was almost right. He put the white ball into Jenya's ring. It might be unstable for other subspace items, but Scylla had tested it earlier and found that it was pretty stable. As expected of an item from the mysterious Fuji family of the upper tree. After putting the white ball into the ring, Scylla sprayed some medicine he had prepared on his body to remove the ointment he had deliberately smeared on his body that was hard for humans to detect. As a hunter, Scylla had done plenty of things like using scent to mislead his prey. Scylla left the big black mouse some distance behind. If the big black mouse could speak, it would definitely say, "What the fuck, running away so fast? Who's the mouse here? This thing isn't human. This thing really isn't human." When the black mouse head followed the scent, what it saw was a cat's face painted with fluorescent liquid on the cave wall. It was smiling like a heartless cat, and there was a big, meow, character next to it. The scent disappeared as it moved forward. Scylla didn't know if the big black mouse could recognize the word, meow, but it was obvious that it was fuming with anger. It was fine as long as it could add fuel to the fire. If it couldn't find Scylla who had stolen the white ball, and with this cat face adding fuel to the fire, what would happen to the black mouse head in the end? The big black mouse had long since kicked the matter of taking revenge on the base's researchers to the other side of the universe. Right now, it only wanted to find that detestable human, take back the white ball, tear that human into pieces, and then stomp him into mud. The operatives in the underground cave had all retreated to the surface. What would the black mouse head do when it was so angry that it couldn't find a target to vent its anger on? It would charge out of the ground. What was there on the ground? The operatives had concentrated their firepower, and there were even armed spaceplanes in the air. Adhering to the rule of, capture the leader first, the big black mouse would become a common target the moment it went up. Moreover, without the white ball's support, the big black mouse's physical strength was declining, and its body's defense had dropped by a lot. Even if its attack power was still strong, it was obviously not as threatening as before. Scylla believed that Huanil could handle it. Scylla slipped to the surface through another route, avoiding the black mouse hordes that the black mouse head had summoned along the way. When he was about to reach the surface, Scylla sensed that there was a group of people nearby, so he ran in front of them through another route. He used the mouse claws he had collected to cut open his combat uniform, leaving behind many wounds. He controlled the color, viscosity, and degree of coagulation of the blood stains, making it look like he had been injured for a while. 2 vials of antiserum had been injected, and Scylla had forced his face to turn a little pale. He looked like a wounded person who had lost too much blood and was excessively exhausted. The communicator had been destroyed after the last call, so that no one could detect Scylla's position through the communicator's signal reception. After finishing his preparations and inspecting his body once more, Scylla lay down peacefully and waited for the group of people who had passed by. The development of the situation was pretty much the same as Scylla had predicted. The group of people had treated Scylla as a wounded person, and even helped him back to the surface. Huanil was relieved after he saw that Scylla was only injured and not in any life-threatening danger. Otherwise, how was he going to explain things to Sir Mo when he returned? Scylla told Huanil his guess, and Huanil immediately ordered everyone to get ready after he was done. They were waiting for the black mice underground to surface. At the same time, Huanil thought, as expected of Sir Mo's favorite student. Every prediction is accurate. Chapter 43. Huanil had specially arranged a single room for Silan. Not long after Silan was sent to the medical room on the spaceplane, the sounds of intense fighting and the rumble of heavy weapons resounded from below. It would seem that the big black mouse had gone mad. Judging from the sound and the distribution of firepower, the black mice were no longer attacking in an organized manner like before. The leader's confused thinking had seriously affected their movements. "Yo, it looks like the final battle has begun," a medic who was treating Silan's wounds said. Their tone had relaxed a little when they heard their colleagues say that the crisis was almost over. The medical reinforcement ship had already arrived at the space station outside the planet, and some emergency medicine had been sent over as well. By the time the situation here was more or less settled, the remaining medics on the ship would probably be sent over to help. "Yeah, Chief Hua has this victory in his grasp," a medic who had delivered the medicine said. The medic looked at Silan, who was lying on the bed, and asked, "Are you a student too?" Silan nodded. The medic made a strong gesture. "I heard from my comrades that all of you are pretty good. However, that academy called Hard is a bit of a pity." "Hard? What happened to him?" Silan was shocked. Indeed, he hadn't heard anything about Hard until now. "He's in the ICU. I heard that he suffered a few claws while trying to save his teammates. He also sustained a few more injuries in the later battles. The antiserum he injected didn't work, and the rat poison had already seeped into his internal organs. I heard that he won't last much longer," the medic said regretfully. He was just a student in his teens. To them, he was just a child. It was truly commendable that he could participate in this battle bravely and not abandon his comrades under such circumstances. Silan jumped off the bed. "Which room is he in?" "The third emergency room from the right upstairs at the corner." "Sigh, your wounds haven't, I won't die." Silan ignored the medical staff beside him and walked out of the ward to go upstairs. Walking upstairs, without looking at the room number, Silan saw a few soldiers with bandages standing at the door. They were probably Hard's team members. There was also a person squatting with his back against the wall, holding his head and crying hoarsely. That was Surd. At this moment, the door of the intensive care unit opened. The doctor walked out and rubbed his forehead tiredly. "I'm sorry, it's still not working. The serums we've injected are all useless." He was very strong, and his obsession was very deep. It was already very good that he had been able to last until now. "You guys, go take a look at him. He can hold on for 5 more minutes at most." Surd and a few of his team members practically rushed in. When they saw Hard, whose entire body was starting to turn black and fester, they rubbed their eyes, took a deep breath, and walked to Hard's side. Hud was wearing an oxygen mask, and it was obvious that he was having difficulty breathing. His eyes were so swollen that his original outline could not be seen clearly. Through the gaps of his slightly opened eyelids, Hud could vaguely see a few people beside him. Now, not only was his vision severely blurred, even his hearing was greatly reduced. But he knew who these people were. He knew who they were just by looking at the blurry figures. Hud could not make a sound, and Silan could only know what Hud was saying by the shape of his mouth. "I don't want to die. It's okay, you won't die. Didn't you say that you want to be a general? When the time comes, you'll go back and look down on those bastards who made sarcastic remarks." Surd's voice was trembling, and he was almost roaring. The tears at the corner of Hud's eyes were bloodshot when they fell, and they dripped onto the white pillow. He knew very well what was waiting for him. There was not much time left, but he really wanted to go back now. Even if it was to communicate with his family, it would be fine. But the distance was too far, and by the time the communication signal was transferred, it would already be too late. Looking at the gaze in Hud's eyes, Silan knew that even at this moment, Hud still did not regret it. He did not want to die, but he did not regret it. Diaz had once said, In the army, on the battlefield, the general was responsible for commanding, and the soldiers were responsible for dying. But soldiers had their glory, and they had their beliefs. They would die without regrets. Raising his hand, Sillin placed his finger on Hud's hand. It looked like he was giving his comrade one last encouragement, but in fact, Sillin was analyzing the toxins in Hud's body, and then synthesizing specific antibodies based on these toxins. He secreted the specific antibodies from his fingertips, and they seeped under Hud's skin through his pores, and through his blood circulation or other means, they were transmitted to various parts of Hud's body. Serd, who had been trying hard to decipher what Hud was trying to express, saw that Hud's eyes had suddenly closed tightly, and his lips were no longer moving. Instantly, his tears flowed out. Sillin used his hand to poke Serd, who was immersed in grief and wiping his tears. He's just asleep. Look at the heartbeat shown on the device. Serd, it seemed like he really had fallen asleep. 5 minutes later, the heartbeat was still there. 10 minutes later, it seemed like it was beating even stronger than before. After Sillin was certain that Hud's life was not in danger, he patted Serd's shoulder and said, "Call the healer over. Hud's vitality is probably too tenacious that even Azrael wouldn't take him in." Oh. Serd was still a little absent-minded. He called the healer over according to Sillin's words. Looking at the medics who were clicking their tongues in wonder, Sillin shook his head and left. But Sillin did not return to the sick room. Instead, he went to the temporary analysis room. There were some researchers who were busy working there. Some of them had escaped from the base earlier, and some of them had come with the medical ship as support. But until now, they had only managed to analyze a dozen or so toxins and antibodies. Many of the soldiers who were scratched and infected by the black mice were still waiting for the unknown antiserum that could detoxify them. Sillin sighed. He had really overestimated them. Right now, he really did feel the same disappointment he felt when he looked at the other researchers in Seven Lights Institute of Mechanical Engineering. "Hey, who are you? Hurry up and leave. This is not a place for you warriors. You have absolutely no regard for discipline and don't know what's good for you. Don't interfere with our work." Sillin ignored whatever these people were saying and walked straight to a molecular synthesis analyzer. He grabbed the researcher sitting there by the collar and pulled him away. The man raised his eyebrows and was about to say something, but Sillin did not even look at him. Instead, he took out a handgun and aimed it at the man's mouth. The moment they saw Sillin take out his gun, the surroundings immediately quieted down. The few people near the door ran out to call for the soldiers. Sitting down in front of the instrument, Sillin swept a glance at the case on the operation panel and then stopped looking at it. His eyes were glued to the screen, and he withdrew his gun to free his hands. His fingers pressed on the operation panel, and the buttons he pressed were absolutely accurate, as if he was very familiar with the instrument. His hand's speed grew faster and faster, and he looked incomparably practiced. Not only that, the researchers in the room realized that the instruments in front of them had begun to operate on their own, and the analyzed data was automatically transmitted to Sillin's instrument. In such a short amount of time, this bastard had actually taken control of every instrument in the analysis room. A few researchers began to criticize Sillin for his nonsense. But gradually, all the researchers in the analysis room fell silent. Molecular formulae were taking shape on the screen of Sillin's instrument, and the data displayed beside the rotating molecules was enough for everyone to understand that they did not have the right to make a sound right now. 1, 2, 3. They had no idea how Sillin did it at all. All they could see was the molecular diagrams of almost 100 antibodies displayed on the screen. Chapter 44. Analyzing and determining a correct antibody required more than 5 people to work at the same time, and it would take at least 3 hours. How long had it been since Sillin entered the room? Less than 30 minutes. This guy had used less than 30 minutes, and it was more than 7 times more than the 50 people in the analysis room combined for more than half a day. What kind of concept was this? How many things could a person's brain process at the same time? What was the limit? The researchers did not know, because all the answers they knew were rejected by the young man in front of them. Just the images on the screen that changed so quickly was enough to make them dizzy. One man, one pair of hands, controlling more than 30 instruments in the analysis room, analyzing and verifying data at the same time. Through multiple parameter calculations and probability analysis, he had obtained 100 antibodies in less than 30 minutes. Sillin ignored the stupefied researchers. He transferred the conclusion he obtained to the synthesizer and inputted the parameters. He separated the antibodies obtained from the synthesizer and labeled the type and dosage. The researchers who ran out earlier and the soldiers who were called over stood quietly at the door and watched Sillin busy himself in front of the synthesizer. Sillin turned his head and glanced at them. What are you still standing there for? Take these synthesized antibodies and use them first. If one doesn't work, try another one. Try them one by one. There's bound to be something that works. The antibodies can be stacked. The soldiers who came over reacted a little faster. After all, the injured and needy person was their comrade. He placed the synthesized antibodies into boxes according to their labels, saluted Sillin, and then quickly left the place. Sillin let out a long sigh when the antibodies were all synthesized. He had spent a lot of energy in this 1 hour. Not only did he have to process the data from more than 30 instruments at the same time, he also had to add in some of the parameters he obtained from the underground cave. There was no doubt that the computational load had increased. To be on the safe side, Sillin added a couple of antibodies that were related to the big black mouse's poison. At the same time, he also modified a dozen or so antibodies so that their side effects would be even smaller. Huanil, who was commanding the battle against the black mice on the outside, listened to the report from the communicator and smiled. He shouted at Knight, who was firing 2 guns not far away, "That friend of yours is a fucking genius. He finished the work of 50 researchers alone. He synthesized more than 100 antibodies. Of course, don't you know whose friend he is?" Both of them felt much more at ease. An hour ago, Pride was clawed and sent to the intensive care unit. Originally, he was worried about whether he had the corresponding antibodies, but now, there were more than 100 antibodies. Walking out of the analysis room, Sillin returned to the ward, and the medical staff treated his wounds again. "Have a good sleep. You'll recover faster that way." "Yes, I'll sleep." Sillin smiled, but the medical staff did not notice the meaningful look in Sillin's eyes. The medics had just left when Sillin's communicator rang. It was something Huanil had specially prepared for Sillin on the spaceplane when he was injured. After the call connected, Knight's face appeared on the screen. "Yo, your complexion looks good. You don't look like a heavily injured person." He wasn't seriously injured in the first place. He just looked scary, Sillin said. It was still very noisy on Knight's side. The sound of gunfire was incessant. "Hee, Sillin, I'm telling you, that big black mouse has been eliminated. You definitely won't be able to imagine how he was eliminated." Knight's face was wrinkled with joy. After hearing that the rat poison in Pride's body had been removed, Knight's heart was very relaxed right now. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken this opportunity to share the embarrassing news of the battlefield with Sillin. He had wanted to call Pride's communicator as well, but that kid had fallen asleep after injecting himself with the medicine. "Oh. Tell me." Sillin also wanted to know how useless that big black mouse was. "I don't know what went wrong with that big guy. It didn't even look at the road and just charged around. In the end, it crashed into a 200 square meter liquid nitrogen warehouse in the base." Sillin could imagine the situation at the time without Knight's explanation. The cold lethality caused by a 200 square meter liquid nitrogen warehouse was absolutely shocking. Coupled with the big black mouse's rampaging speed, the power of the cold explosion was not something the big black mouse could withstand in its current state. If it had been the big black mouse with the white ball in its body before, the liquid nitrogen would not have caused much harm to it. It was injured one moment, but it would recover in the next. This further proved that the white ball was special. Sillin rubbed the green pattern on his finger. No one could tell what he was thinking. The big black mouse was suffering from the cold damage caused by the liquid nitrogen warehouse, and then it was attacked by the operation team's firepower. One could imagine its ending. Knight described the situation vividly. After all, almost everyone on the battlefield was cleaning up the last loose ends, so there wasn't much to do. I even took the opportunity to snatch some souvenirs, the big black mouse's claws and front teeth. Hee hee, I didn't get them if I was slow. Knight was very smug. You can be smug all you want. Right, don't hang up yet. Let me show you the beautiful nurse, Sillin said after looking at the monitor next to him. The monitor was showing the scene outside the door. A beautiful nurse with a graceful appearance was standing at the door with a medicine tray and pressing the doorbell. When Sillin answered the call just now, he had set the door to anti-disturbance mode, so he had to press the doorbell to let the person inside open it if he wanted to come in. Sillin placed the communicator at the corner of the bedside table. It looked like he had cut off the connection, but in reality, it was just that he could not hear or see the other side, but the person on the other side could hear and see the scene on this side. He also covered it with a book as a cover, so it would not be discovered. Knight looked at the image of the beautiful nurse coming in with the medicine tray on the communicator, and his smile was especially sinister and wretched. Her figure was really good. With such a beautiful nurse taking care of him, that guy Sillin was in luck. The nurse smiled warmly and said softly, "It's time to change the bandages." "Thank you." The nurse simply pursed her lips and smiled at Sillin's gaze that was lingering on her voluptuous chest. She skillfully replaced the infusion bag with a new one before reaching out a fair and smooth finger to poke Sillin's forehead, little pervert. Sillin was not embarrassed at all. He giggled and said, "That's because I'm facing a beautiful woman." After the beautiful nurse had left, Sillin turned on the communicator. "How is it?" "Not bad, right?" "Stunner, appraisal complete," Knight said with a wink. "Why don't you mutilate yourself a bit and enjoy the service of a beautiful woman?" "TSK, go enjoy it yourself. I'm not talking to you anymore. I'm going to clean up the battlefield. After I'm done with the last few black mice, I'll tell you guys about today's great showdown when we get back. I heard that you thoroughly despised those arrogant researchers today, kid. Well done. Forget it. Hurry up and clean up the mess and get yourself a few more rat claws. We can sell them for a high price when we get back to Seven Lights. Makes sense. I'm going to grab a big bag first." After ending the communication, Sillin's smile faded away. His eyes were cold as he stared at the infusion bag he had just changed. A killer could not hide the cold stench of blood even if they had changed their skin. However, he did not need to do it himself this time. Someone would naturally investigate this. Chapter 45. Since the battle was nearing its end, the remaining medical personnel in the space station ships had been sent to the planet. The research base's protective shield had finally been opened as well, so a few nurses were assigned to every spaceplane to take care of the wounded and sick. A nurse on patrol opened the door to Sillin's ward and prepared to record the patient's body examination data. The data displayed on the instrument was normal, but when she touched Sillin's wrist, she discovered that it was ice cold. Looking at the temperature displayed on the instrument, the nurse touched Sillin's wrist and forehead. It was still ice cold, and even his pulse was almost undetectable. How could this be? The nurse panicked and hurriedly pressed the emergency alarm bell beside her. The battlefield had ended, and Huanil was directing the post-battle cleanup, rescuing the wounded in the caves and other parts of the base. The waste treatment plant had also sent a message that the cleanup was complete. It was only now that Huanil could be considered to have relaxed a little. But that was all. He still had a series of things to take care of after the mission was over. Compensation for the dead and wounded, mission reports and post-battle analysis were all things that he had to handle personally. Huan breathed deeply. This ordeal was finally over. Thank goodness those little devils were fine. As it turned out, Huan had relaxed too early. Just as he finished exhaling, Huan communicator rang. Knight, who was dragging a bag full of rat claws and teeth back, saw Huan yelling into the phone from afar, "A bunch of trash, I'm coming over right now." After ending the call, Huan said something to a captain beside him and had Gerard come over to take charge of the follow-up matters. Then, he ran towards the spaceplane. Did something happen? Knight walked over and asked the captain. The captain did not think too much about it and said, "I think something happened to a patient on the spaceplane." Patient? There were not many people who could make Huan rush over in such a hurry without even caring about the battlefield matters. However, comrades like Gerard and a few other captains who were close to Huan were all on the battlefield. As for the patient on the spaceplane, Knight put down the bag and took out his communicator to make a call. It didn't take long before Pride's 2 nostrils appeared on the communicator. He said in an extremely sleepy and impatient tone, "What's all this noise about?" "I'm still sleeping. The doctor told me to rest more. If you delay my recovery, you..." Without waiting for Pride to finish, Knight cut off the call and dialed Silen's number, but no one picked up even after a long time. Knight no longer cared about the bag of spoils of war, and ran towards the spaceplane. Everything had been fine just now. What had happened? Hart's ward. Although he was lying in the intensive care unit, Hart's swollen face and eyes showed that he was recovering well. Hart was talking to Serd, and Serd was telling him what had happened. As Serd spoke, the two of them heard a commotion outside. It sounded like they were heading towards the emergency room. "I wonder who it will be this time." Serd sighed. Not long after, a nurse came in and checked the infusion bag. She then took a sample from the bag and put it into the instrument in her hand for testing. Seeing that the nurse was clearly relieved, Serd asked curiously, "What's wrong?" The nurse replied with a reassuring smile, "I'm fine. You know, I can also ask the doctor directly." "Sigh, you're really fine here, but something happened to someone in the ward downstairs. We need to recheck every patient's medication." "The ward below. Who is it?" Serd asked casually. "I think it's someone called Silen." When Huan arrived at the emergency room entrance, Serd was waiting there with Hard in his wheelchair. "Why did you come out? You need rest the most when your injury reappears." Hard could not salute like Serd when he saw Huan. He raised his hand to salute but was stopped by Huan. He said, "I don't feel at ease lying there." Behind Huan, a person wearing a medic uniform ran over to report the situation. The data of the monitors inside the ward had been erased, the 2 monitors outside the ward had also been tampered with, and the instruments inside the ward had all been hacked and tampered with. That was why they did not send out any alarm when the patient's body was in danger. Most importantly, they couldn't find any suspicious people right now. Huan looked at the records on the electronic notebook and frowned deeper and deeper. Negligence. A medic came over from the drug testing room and said to Huan, "There is a highly toxic substance inside the infusion bag. According to the dosage, it can kill within half an hour, but the patient injected with this substance does not feel any discomfort at all. They will only feel more and more sleepy. Then, they will sleep until they die." The medic did not dare to say the last sentence, but everyone knew what it meant. Knight, who had rushed up to the ward downstairs when he did not see Silen, just happened to hear this. He was so angry that he pulled out his gun and pointed it at the medic's head. "Are you people eating shit? Don't you know which bag is poisonous and which is not? Didn't you do any tests?" To a warrior, they had no regrets if they died on the battlefield, but their souls would not rest in peace if they died for no reason or value. "Knight, calm down." Huan motioned for the medics to pull Knight away, but failed to grab the gun in his hand. Knight broke free from their hands and put away his gun. He took the electronic notebook Huan Neil handed him and looked at the situation recorded on it. The monitors were tampered with and could not capture any suspicious people. Infusion bag, wait a minute. I know who changed the infusion bag. Knight turned on his communicator and pulled up the communication record. It's this woman. Nurse? Huan Neil turned on his communicator, dialed a number and sent the video over. Investigate this woman. Not long after he disconnected, Huan Neil's communicator rang again. Huan Neil looked at the number. It was a special communicator from Seven Lights. Although the main mission this time was over, the follow-up work was still being handled. Normally speaking, the people from Seven Lights would not ask about it at this time. After all, it might involve military influence. Huan Neil suddenly felt nervous when he thought of someone. He gritted his teeth and accepted the call. The image flashed, and Mo Hang's unusually kind smiling face appeared on the screen. Oh, little nail. As expected, cold sweat poured down Huan Neil's back like a waterfall. He had never been this nervous even when he was facing that many black mice. Elder Mo, hello. Huan Neil's body tensed up as he saluted. Seeing Huan Neil's reaction, Mo Hang said, "What's wrong? You're sweating all over. Why are you so nervous when you see me? Am I scarier than those mutated black mice?" Mo Hang had a better understanding of the mission here. It's more than scarier. It's much, much scarier. Huan Neil thought in his mind, but he really did not know how to answer. But before he could, Mo Hang spoke. Something happened to Silen. How could Mo Hang not guess something from Huan Neil's reaction? But when Mo Hang said this, even Huan Neil on the other side of the communicator could feel the low pressure around Sir Mo. Sir Mo was about to flip out. Chapter 46. Speaking of which, Mo Hang's face turned from sunny to gloomy the moment he returned from his business trip and found the leave slip Silen had left in the workshop. It caused everyone in the research division to keep quiet out of fear. Everyone knew that Sir Mo was in a bad mood, very bad at that. Because he knew certain things about the military operation, Mo Hang refrained from contacting him. It was only when he heard that the operation had come to an end, and that Silen had analyzed and synthesized over 100 antibodies by himself that Mo Hang's mood improved a little. To quote Vice Headmaster and Ting's words, the old fox's tail had risen a little higher. But Mo Hang didn't expect that Sir Mo's cloudy mood would turn into a storm the moment he heard that Silen was in trouble. Mo Hang's expression turned even darker as he listened to Huan Neil's explanation. You're saying that my disciple made such a great contribution despite his injuries, but in the end, he was stabbed in the back. Huan Neil was silent. With his understanding of Mo Hang, it was best not to speak at this time. What's the situation now? Mo Hang's voice turned deep and heavy. It was so heavy that it was almost unbearable. After resuscitation, the doctor said that he has stabilized a little. I'm still worried. I'll rush over with some people right now. Huan Neil was contacting Mo Hang from a lounge next to the emergency room. While Huan Neil was sweating profusely as he dealt with Mo Hang, a medic knocked on the door and came in. Huan Neil had told him before to inform him the moment there was any progress from the emergency room. Seeing that Huan Neil was contacting him, the medic passed him the tablet. After reading the contents of the tablet, Huan Neil immediately felt a little more confident. Elder Mo, I just received news that Silen is out of danger. Seeing Mo Hang's obviously distrustful gaze, Huan Neil took the communicator into the emergency room and showed Mo Hang the vital data on the device. Then, he looked at Silen's complexion. It was only after a long while that Mo Hang finally believed him a little. However, he still requested that Silen be sent back to Seven Lights as soon as possible. Otherwise, Mo Hang wouldn't be at ease. I'm telling you, this old man won't bat an eyelid even if everyone in the base is fed to the rats. Their value added together is far less than my disciples. Why should others pay with their lives when they themselves are incapable of causing a major incident? Fucking pay with their lives. Why do they need someone else to wipe their ass for them? His son, General Mo Ching, was a true disciple of the old man. Back then, Huan Neil and Gerard had experienced General Mo's ruffian temperament firsthand. Once his ruffian temperament was activated, it would be hard for anyone to stop him from doing what he wanted to do. Not only that, the opinions he made were absolutely the opposite of subtlety. For a person like Mo Hung, when he was in a good mood, he would put on the appearance of an amiable senior academic, but when he got angry, he would have to pray for the best. That was the principle of a bully's temper. The world they face is big, but the world in their hearts is not necessarily big. So, when they want to protect someone, don't stop them. Huan Neil knew this very well. That was why he could only remain silent in the face of Mo Hang's outburst of extreme remarks. He would listen to them one moment and forget them the next. Otherwise, it would affect Sir Mo's amiable image when it got out. It was a good thing that he had asked all the medical personnel to leave when he came in. Otherwise, there's no point in talking about it. After giving Huan Neil a few more instructions, Mo Hung finally disconnected reluctantly. However, Huan Neil had to report to Mo Hung about Silan's situation every hour, or Mo Hung would personally rush over with his men. There was no way Huan Neil would dare trouble Sir Mo. After disconnecting, Mo Hang's expression didn't look much better. Ever since he decided to accept Silan as his direct disciple, he had investigated the Duance family. He knew about the dirty tricks and dirty dealings within the family. The Duance family's influence in the 10 trade sectors could be considered great, but it was completely useless to Mo Hung. Mo Hung looked at a person's ability, not their background or the benefits brought by their identity. He even hoped that Silan could leave the Duance family. It would be best if he didn't have any background at all, so that he wouldn't be caught in those dirty fights. However, now that something like this had happened, Mo Hung wouldn't just stand by and watch his disciple suffer. Someone had to pay the price. Although Mo Hung was in the academic field, in fact, the old man also had a heart of iron and blood. Just look at General Mo Ching. To be able to teach a person like General Mo, how could the old man be a soft-hearted person? Mo Hung adjusted the signal transmission code on his communicator and dialed a number. Some people had stretched their hands too far. They had gotten used to running amok in the 10 trade sectors, so they didn't know how big the universe was. Huan Neil, Knight and the others began to track down the culprit. It didn't take long before they heard that the woman had committed suicide by injecting cyanide into the medicine warehouse. Moreover, she didn't avoid the warehouse's surveillance cameras and injected a large amount of cyanide right in front of them. She had no way to live after failing her mission and exposing herself. She couldn't understand why Silan was still alive even at the moment of her death. It had been so long since the injection, but he was still alive. How did this woman sneak into the medical ship? And who was covering for her? The interrogations and checks on medical personnel were also relatively strict. She definitely had accomplices, and more than one at that. It could be a soldier, it could be a researcher, it could be a medical personnel. Huan Neil also knew the complexity of the situation. When he recalled the promise he made to Mo Hung immediately decided to have the ship send the wounded back to Seven Lights first. Silan, Pride and the others would assign special personnel to watch over them. Nothing could go wrong, or else the epaulets on his shoulders would have to be removed. While everyone was busy, Silan's mind was very clear even though he was asleep. He knew what was happening around him, knew Mo Hang's concern for him, and knew that Knight, Hard and Surt had been standing guard outside the door all this time. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't touched. Genya had told Silan when he was very young that humans were social animals. The number of people who had brushed shoulders or swept their gazes across the galaxy was more than 100 billion, but the number of people who truly treated you well could be counted on one hand. This was a kind of wealth that could not be obtained no matter how much money or how long one spent. even a loner would have a longing hidden in the depths of their heart. This show was developing according to Silen's expectations. He predicted that those people would have a backup plan, and the moment he saw the woman holding the medicine tray on the monitor, he knew that the backup plan had come. That was why he had left his communicator on and left a trail for Knight to trace. Even if he couldn't, he could still force the killer to his death. This kind of killer who failed his mission and exposed himself was dead for sure. However, this incident also allowed Silen to feel the warmth he hadn't felt for a long time. It was the comfort he felt again after Genya and Hina left one after another. When he was lying on the sickbed, there was at least someone standing guard on the other side of the door. For someone his age, he had experienced too much. Chapter 47. On the airship, Silen, Pride and Hard were arranged to stay in the same sickroom. Serd and Knight were also in the same sickroom. Although Knight wasn't injured, Neil still arranged for him to go back first. Knight had no objections to this, and he felt a bit more at ease guarding the sickroom himself in case another assassination attempt occurred. Since the matter had come to an end, Silen recovered very quickly. Right now, the 5 of them were chatting in the room. 3 were lying down, 2 were sitting, and 3 were lying down. Serd was peeling fruits, and Knight was narrating the news he had just heard. I heard that the big black mouse had doubled its chromosomes after mutation, and produced a batch of little black mice asexually. The form is just like the queen and drones of bees. But I don't know the specifics, so people from other research bases went over to study it together. You know, if the results of this research were to come out, it would at least be published in an academic electronic journal with more than 70 contribution points in the League of Stars. Then they would become famous. Don't the people in the research base have any psychological trauma at all? Serd asked. Even now, whenever he talked about mice, he would recall the scene where he brushed past those black mice and felt an uncontrollable chill. That's what those people like. For example, if you were shot in the middle of an operation and managed to survive, would you be afraid of being robbed? Would you pick up a gun and participate in an operation next time? Of course I would participate in an operation. What's there to be afraid of with a gun? Isn't it normal to get shot? They are the same. Isn't it normal for them to research strange things? Sigh, don't interrupt me, I'll continue. Knight cleared his throat and continued, I heard that those black mice produced a certain enzyme in their mutated bodies that allows them to continuously breathe without oxygen for a period of time. This also explains why they could stay in the deep underground cavern for such a long time. Knight was a person who always had an I'm impatient look on his face when facing others, but he had a different attitude and was a lot more talkative towards those he acknowledged. Seeing Knight's I'm an expert look, Pride glanced sideways and snorted, what a shame. Oh ho, you have a problem with us, young master. Why don't you take a look at yourself? It's understandable that Silen and Hard were injured, but what about you? Young master useless burden. When he saw Pride glaring at him indignantly, Knight threw a grape at him. Don't tell me that you can't tell that the people in your group are special agents. It's precisely because I can tell that they are special agents that I don't want to be next to them. That's why you deserve to be scratched by the black mice. Was that something you could handle alone? Do you think you're a star-level hunter or a heavenly edict warrior? Use your brain more, or else you'll never catch up to your brother, Ji Feihang. If I can't become a heavenly edict warrior, do you think you can? At least I became one before you did, Knight said disdainfully. If it wasn't for Ji Feihang asking him to take care of him, would he even care about this idiot? When Serd saw that Pride was about to charge over and fight to the death, Serd immediately went up to mediate. Silen was amused as he watched from the side. If Serd didn't step forward to mediate, Pride would probably get beaten up by Knight again. Similar incidents had already happened a few times. However, the Heavenly Edict warriors and star-ranked hunters that Knight mentioned caught Silen's attention. There were countless hunters in the League of Stars, and those who stood at the top were awarded the title of Star, which was what Knight referred to as star-ranked hunters. Currently, in the hunter world of the League of Stars, there were a total of 6 people who held the title of Star. The leaders of the 4 great hunter regiments were all star-ranked hunters, and there were also 2 elusive loners. These 6 people were collectively known as the 6 Stars of Hunter. In the army, the Heavenly Edict warriors held the highest honor among warriors, and were awarded the title of Heavenly Edict. However, they were too mysterious, and many things were classified as top secret by the army. To the public, they only existed in legends. Even the descendants of generals like Knight and Pride were not clear about them. They only knew that there were 4 of them. The 4 Heavenly Edict generals and the 6 Stars of Hunter were the lifelong goals of warriors and hunters in this era. Only after this mission did we realize the difference between students and the regular army. We still need to work hard, Hard sighed as he lay on his sickbed. Hearing Hard's words, Knight and Pride looked at Scylla at the same time without saying a word. Hey, what kind of reward do you think the school will give us after we return? Surt said expectantly. Reward? Knight rubbed his chin, it's either credits or money. However, we will record a military merit in our files. It may not be a lot, but it's at least an honor. It will be more useful if we mix into the army in the future. That's good enough. Military merit is enough. Hard grinned. When they arrived at Planet 7 Lights, the warship stopped at the space station and was transported by a spaceplane. They landed at the Training Division's special port. Scylla and Hard were pushed out in wheelchairs. Originally, Pride was supposed to be pushed as well, but he did not sit on it for the sake of his pride. A lot of people were already gathered at the Training Division's port, and some of 7 Lights higher-ups were present as well. After all, this operation was due to the accident at 7 Lights Research Base. The students of the Training Division were all present, and so were Lung and Ci Jincheng. However, Lung was winking at Scylla and pointing towards a certain direction with his chin. There was a very familiar long flying car parked there. After Scylla was pushed out of the spaceplane, a person walked down from the flying car. When Knight saw that person, he abandoned Scylla and retreated without any sense of loyalty. From the looks of it, he was trying to hide as far away as possible. When Scylla saw the newcomer, the corner of his lips twitched. Why are you here? Mo Heng looked at Scylla seriously from head to toe with a stern face. After confirming that he had recovered well, he raised his hand and pinched. At the Training Division's port, the students and school higher-ups who came to greet and comfort the wounded, and the people who came down from the spaceplanes added up to several thousand people. Under the gazes of these several thousand people, Scylla was pinched and reprimanded by Mo Heng. Mo Heng's strong and vigorous voice could be heard in the huge port. There were a lot of seniors among the students who came here, and they had only seen Mo Heng's amiable appearance before. When had they ever seen Vice Headmaster Mo like this? Every single one of them fell silent. Just looking at Scylla's face pinched by Mo Heng was enough to make their faces hurt. However, the school higher-ups were surprised. Those who knew Mo Heng well knew that he would only pinch someone's face if it was someone he cared a lot about. Moreover, Mo Heng might look like he was reprimanding Scylla, but he was actually telling everyone else that this kid was under his protection, and they would have to go through this old man first if they wanted to touch him. 10 trade sectors, inside a manor on a planet at Sector D that was not far away from the bustling city. Aflon was watering leisurely with a watering can, and behind him, Officer Safo was reporting the situation. Those families have suffered quite a bit from this incident. The military's seizure of supplies, the government's sudden investigation, the termination of business partnerships, and even the famous academics who were invited as guests have changed their minds. Aflon did not react much to the report. After he was done watering, he put down the watering can and wiped his hands with a towel Safo passed to him. Then, he said, triple his bounty this time. Yes. Then, the person responsible for contacting 7 Lights, follow the original plan. Alright, I'll get to it right away. Chapter 48. Careful, watch your legs. Hey, be gentle. At Seven Lights Technology Development Zone's Research Division Hospital, Mo Hung was directing people to transfer Silen from the wheelchair to the hospital bed. Silen had said that he could move on his own, but Mo Hung did not listen to him at all. On one hand, he wore a look of disdain as if Silen was a troublesome person, and on the other, his hands were constantly directing the people carrying Silen to move as if he was afraid that Silen would bump into something. Silen wanted to cry but had no tears. In reality, he could kill 10 black mice with his bare hands right now without suffering a single injury, but who told him to pretend to be sick? Pretending to be sick was a very painful thing. He brought this upon himself. Although the medical equipment showed that Silen was completely able to leave the hospital, Mo Hung still forced Silen to continue recuperating for another 10 days, and no one was allowed to visit him during these 10 days. In reality, this was probably his punishment for Silen's sudden leave to participate in the training division's dangerous mission. Every day, Silen could only communicate with other people through the microcomputer. Seven Lights had an internal communication platform, and Silen's friend list only had 5 people: Knight, Lung, Ci Jincheng, Hard and Surd. Although there were only 5 of them, the chat box was flashing non-stop every day. Today, when Silen woke up in the morning and turned on the microcomputer, several messages popped up. They were all talking about the same thing, the rat extermination mission that the 5 of them had participated in. Now that the matter over at the biochemistry base had been resolved, there was no longer a need to hide it any longer. Moreover, even if every student in the training division kept it a secret, some students who were not part of the training division could always inquire about it if they wanted to. Since the matter over at the base had been exposed, Silen and the other 5 students who participated in the mission had also been exposed. There were even people who had created a strength ranking for them. Silen opened the Seven Lights forum, according to the forum address Knight left behind. As expected, the first few hot threads were related to them, and there were even pictures of the black mice at the top. There were a lot of replies below, some positive, some negative. Of course, there were also people who came purely to see the mice. As for the ranking of the 5, from 1st to 5th, they were Knight, Pride, Surd, Hard and Silen. As for why the ranking was like this, there was a reason. Why were Hud and Silen at the end of the line? When they got off the spaceplane that day, only the 2 of them were sitting. Hard was discharged the next day, but Celine had to wait a few more days. That was why he was the last one in line. Pride should be thankful that he insisted on not sitting in a wheelchair that day. Otherwise, he would have died of depression if he had to queue behind Surd. However, the more Silen read, the more ridiculous the content became. Where did it start to stray from? This was due to the person on the 1626th comment, Bayan. As soon as this person replied, the comments below began to go astray until they had nothing to do with the content of the post. This was probably what Knight and the rest wanted Silen to see. This is what the old man said. Actually, I'm more optimistic about the 5th one. As a result, the people below began to reply, and judging from the time, the speed at which they replied was extremely fast. In less than a minute, more than 5 pages were filled. Surprise appearance of Beauty Saw. Beauty Saw, did you see the vow of true love I wrote to you 57 days, 12 hours, 38 minutes and 3 seconds ago? Is this the legendary Beauty Saw? Could it be that Beauty Saw is interested in the 5th brat? What? Beauty Saw is interested in the 5th brat. Beauty Saw, have you already given your heart to the 5th brat? Breaking news, Beauty Saw has a crush on a first-year junior. Which bastard is the 5th? Drag him out and strip him. Silen was speechless. He really admired their ability to twist words. He had witnessed how they could turn a grape into a durian, and each of them was more confident than the other. Silen was speechless at the replies when the chat window started to flash again. Lung and Knight's avatars kept flashing. What now? He clicked it open and saw that both of them had sent him a large picture. On the picture was a girl wearing very fresh, light-colored, casual attire. Her hair was tied into a ponytail, and she was wearing a sun hat. Her expression could not be seen clearly, and she was holding a bouquet of flowers in her hands. The main point of this picture was that its background was the hospital Silen was staying in. Silen, look at the main page of Seven Lights Forum. C.I. Jincheng sent over a message. When he returned to the main page of the forum, he saw that all the posts marked in red were incomparably eye-catching. They were all posts about that Beauty Saw, and there were countless comments denouncing Silen, Beauty Saw's rumored boyfriend. There was also a pinned post titled, Live Stream of Beauty Saw Visiting Her Rumored Boyfriend. The more Silen read, the more confused he became. He didn't even know who Beauty Saw was, so what the hell was this rumored boyfriend? The little speaker below the chat window kept ringing, and Silen immediately clicked on the simultaneous call button. Hello, Silen, have you seen Beauty Saw yet? Silen, you're actually raising wildflowers, no, delicate flowers, behind our backs. There's an adultery going on, we demand the truth. While the two big mouths, Lung and Night, were quarreling, the door to Silen's ward opened with a beep. The medical robot walked in, and behind it was the Beauty Saw that Silen saw on the picture. Hi, Aunt Silen. The newcomer revealed a cheerful smile and greeted him generously. Oh, it's Beauty Saw. The voices on the other side came to an abrupt halt, because Silen had turned off the microcomputer directly and looked at the newcomer. At the same time, Lung, who was at the trade zone, and Knight, who was at the training division, were hopping mad. Silen actually dared to turn off the microcomputer. Could it be that he was going to do something he loved? The duo's thoughts had already begun to diverge. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Gallo Teresa, 5th year, from the Research Division's Design Institute. She wasn't seductive, but carried a kind of refreshing beauty. Her every move gave off a feeling of magnanimity, and she was very approachable. This was everyone's first impression of Teresa. Silen did not know who the others were referring to as Beauty Saw, but he knew the name, Teresa. There were introductions of famous people in Seven Lights in the school's handbook, and Teresa was one of them. Teresa was a famous talented girl from the Research Division's Design Institute. She was a specially recruited student, and she was promoted straight to 5th year after 3 years of school. She studied under Seven Lights' famous Her Majesty, and the wife of Seven Lights Institute's headmaster, Professor Lin, Old Madam Lin. Professor Lin and Mo Hung were old acquaintances, so it was no wonder that Mo Hung allowed her to come in. Is Professor Lin's project done? Silen asked. He had heard from Ling Long that Queen Lin was going on a business trip to Sector A for a project. From the looks of it, Teresa must have gone with Queen Lin. Teresa put the flower in her hand into a vase at the side. Yeah, we just came back today as well. Professor Mo praised you quite a bit at the dinner table today, and there aren't many people who can earn such high praise from him. Celine shrugged his shoulders and did not comment. Glancing at the microcomputer next to Silen, Teresa smiled and said, I've been gone for a long time. I saw your post while browsing the Seven Lights forum today, so I casually replied to it. I didn't expect the reaction to be so big though. But senior sister, you don't look sorry at all. Hee hee. Teresa did not deny it either. After chatting casually for a while, Teresa stood up and bid farewell. It had been a while since she left Seven Lights for the project, and old Madam Lin was still waiting to deal with some trivial matters in Seven Lights. She could not stay here any longer. Thank you for coming to visit, senior sister. I'll treat you to a meal after I'm discharged. Alright, I'll be waiting. Less than 5 minutes had passed since Teresa entered the hospital until she left, but the Seven Lights forum was already in an uproar. Although there was only a picture of Teresa entering and leaving the hospital, just this alone was enough to make everyone's imagination roam. Then, someone used some unknown method to confirm that Teresa had indeed gone to Silen's ward. As a result, the entire Seven Lights Forum boiled over. However, Silen did not pay any attention to them. After Teresa had left, Silen flipped his hand open. It was a debit card. Teresa had patted Silen's shoulder before she left, and it was also at that time that she had passed the card to Silen. No wonder he kept feeling that something was amiss. So the contact person was her. This was also why Silen had said that he would treat her to a meal after Teresa had left the hospital. Silen smiled meaningfully. Other than knowing that she was the contact person, Silen had also discovered a secret. As expected of a strong competitor for the Duance family's successor, Aflan had hidden himself well. Chapter 49. Silen was finally allowed to leave the hospital by Mo Hung, and he even wrote a touching and incisive 10,000-word self-criticism. But in the 10,000-word self-criticism, there wasn't a single sentence such as never again. That Mo Hung really wanted to read. In Mo Hung's words, this was a machine without a core component. One word, trash. However, although the self-criticism was a little trash, Mo Hung still framed it and hung it in his office. Every time Silen went over to submit a mission, Mo Hung would point at the self-criticism on the wall and blah 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 blah. Of course, this was a story for another time. When Silen left the hospital and returned to the hostel, the door behind him was closed the moment he entered. There were 3 chairs in the living room, and 3 people were sitting on them. They were in the posture of a tripartite hearing. The trio who were usually too busy to return to the hostel were all present. Ci Jincheng was playing with the control panel in his hand. If Silen were to run out right now, he would probably be attacked by some unknown substance. Knight was moving his wrists and pressing his fingers loudly. Lung was smiling wickedly at the side. Severe punishment for confessing, or resistance to streaking. Choose one. Silen looked at the trio, calmly dragged over a chair and sat down facing them. I choose C, you bastard. The trio rushed up and pressed Silen down, strangling him. Hurry up, what's your relationship with Beauty Saw? Beauty Saw's supporters are already at our doorstep. Look, they even threw rotten eggs. Lung pointed at a yellow spot at the window and complained. Bullshit, there's actually someone in Seven Lights who dares to bully you? That was obviously thrown out when you were trying to fry an egg. There's even oil on it, don't think I don't know. Be gentler, my neck is going to break if you keep strangling me. I'll talk, alright? After finally freeing his neck and catching his breath, Silen explained the cause and effect. A long while later, Knight asked suspiciously, is it really because of Professor Mo and Professor Lin that she knows about you? Ask her if you don't believe me. Lung looked thoughtful, so you're saying that you're the closest to the water, right? It's the right time, the right place, and the right people. If you still can't get it, you'll be too weak. Knight also came over mysteriously. What did you guys do in those 5 minutes? Chatting. What else? Still chatting. After trying hard to discern Silen's facial expressions, the 3 of them said in disappointment, what a talent. Speaking of which, when the students on the Seven Lights forum dug out Silen's identity and background, there were indeed some who gave up. In terms of looks, Silen was certainly not bad. His temperament would definitely make people's eyes light up. In terms of status and background, he was a member of the Duance family, and his father, Aflan, was on the rise recently, and the position of heir was not far away. At that time, he would be the crown prince of the Duance family. Other than some forces in sectors A, B, and C, there really weren't many forces that could surpass the Duance family. In terms of talent and learning, he was Elder Mo's student. How could he have become Elder Mo's student if he didn't have some ability? In terms of strength, there was no need to even mention this guy. He had carried guns and killed rats before, and his individual combat strength was ranked top 5 in the training division. How could he compare? Therefore, more people were inclined towards watching the show and gossiping. The next day, Silen took his hoverboard and prepared to go out. The trio eating breakfast looked at him at the same time. Today is the weekend. There's no class. I'm treating Teresa to a meal today. Silen was fairly frank. Fuck. Animal. The trio took out a bunch of tools the moment Silen's front foot left the hoverboard. Reception is normal. Let's test the satellite surveillance. Let's see how that Silen guy picks up a beauty this time. Silen knew that the three scumbags in the hoverboard would not be idle, but he did not plan to avoid them. After buying a few things on the way, Silen came to a forest outside the school zone and arrived at the agreed place with Teresa. Teresa was already waiting there. She was still dressed in simple and elegant attire, and she looked exceptionally harmonious when combined with the surrounding scenery. Sorry to keep you waiting. Silen put away the hoverboard and took out the food he just bought. It's fine. I purposely came early. It did surprise a lot of people to come to the forest area for a picnic instead of a restaurant. Why did he say that it was a lot of people? Other than the three idiots in Silen's hoverboard, there were even more people who were tracking Teresa. However, be it from the satellite or using binoculars from afar, the dense forest was their biggest obstacle. They could not see clearly even if they used a fluoroscope. Therefore, they could only see two people sitting there, enjoying their picnic and chatting happily while watching the flowing stream. There were already a lot of photos posted on the Seven Lights forum. Although they were separated by a large patch of leaves, one could still see the two people sitting by the stream. They could not help but let their imaginations run wild. Inside Silen's hoverboard, Lung complained incessantly, Silen is so cunning. He actually went to such a remote place. The image is blocked by the leaves. We really should install a bug on that guy. Of course, Lung was only saying it casually. They also knew that there was a limit to everything. Moreover, C.I. Jincheng was the one who threw the tracker into Silen's bag in broad daylight, and Silen did not say anything about it. This proved that he was not trying to hide his tracks at all. They must be talking about a beautiful life and a romantic future. Many people thought so, but in reality, the topic Silen and Teresa were talking about had absolutely nothing to do with romance. Since this incident dealt a huge blow to the opponent, Mr. Duan's Aflon has paid 3 times the reward. I believe that it will not be any less for the next 2 months. Teresa said. My mentor, Professor Mo, has taken action. Not only that, your 3 roommates have all taken action. The military, business, government and academia have all given some pressure. I heard that the assassin organization has also been put on a wanted list, and they have been thinking of taking revenge on their sugar daddy recently. Silen smiled when he heard this, and said nothing. Although the suppression from many sides will make those people restrain themselves a little, Mr. Aflon told me to tell you that some people from the Duance family might take this opportunity to make a move. This way, they can shift the blame onto those unlucky bastards, so you should be careful for the time being. However, I think that Mr. Aflon is worrying too much. With your abilities, there is absolutely no problem for you to deal with these people. You really think highly of me. Silen turned his head to look at that little stream. Unlike the purely man-made streams of planet Brown Earth, this place had a beauty that leaned towards nature. There was even a crab under that rock. When he was young, he would often go to the stream that was slightly further away from the slums to play with Hina, but there was nothing else there other than rocks and water. Hina even said that there was no life in that stream, and that if she could one day see an overflowing stream with all kinds of little fishes, prawns and crabs on TV, she would definitely be very happy. Silen touched the pendant hanging in front of his chest inside his clothes. Do you see it? Hina, there are crabs here. This stream is alive, and we will see even more lively streams in the future. Who are you thinking of? Teresa asked. In that instant just now, the gentleness in Silen's eyes seemed to be able to drown a person in it. I'm thinking of crabs. Silen stretched his back. Is there anything else? No. I'll tell you when I receive news in the future. As long as you remember the payment. You will absolutely not be left out of this. Let's end our meeting here. I see that you're getting impatient as well. Let's give each other a goodbye kiss before we leave. When she was done, Teresa leaned forward and leaned towards Silen. On the screens of many Seven Lights students, they saw Beauty Sa and Silen lean towards each other. The distance between them grew closer and closer, and then, fuck. The tree leaves blocked it. Lung pointed at the tree leaves that blocked the screen and said angrily, I'll give anyone who cuts down that bastard tree 100 million. At the same time, in another room, Ling Long crushed the 5th microcomputer of the day. Everyone knew that the duo had kissed. Did they really kiss? It was true. But, it was just the face. Teresa had only kissed Silen's face, but due to the effect of the tree leaves, everyone took it for granted. Teresa's grasp of the angle was very good. She knew exactly which direction they would be monitored from. After cleaning up the things on the ground, Silen displayed his hoverboard. Teresa pressed the key button, and a flying car flew up not far away. Its color turned from green to white. It was the camouflage color she used earlier. Do you need a ride? Teresa asked as she sat inside the car. No thanks. It was a pleasure doing business with you. Remember the payment. It was a pleasure doing business with you. Both parties left in 2 different directions. However, Silen flew along the stream for a while longer, and not many people paid attention to him anymore. Knight and the others also opened the forum and looked at the posts. The entire Seven Lights forum was filled with hot posts regarding Silen and Teresa. There were pictures and the truth. The moment Silen entered the room, Knight and Lung threw down their microcomputers and ran towards him. Kid, hurry up and tell us the crucial part of today's, fuck, crabs, where did you get these crabs? They're so fresh. Knight and Lung did not care about the picnic kissing incident any longer. The duo rubbed their hands around a big bag of crabs. C.I. Jincheng. These 2 gluttons. That night, while everyone else in Seven Lights was spitting saliva around the forum, the 4 people in Silen's room were happily eating crabs around the table. Chapter 50. The Shisha incident may have caused quite a stir, but it only lasted for a few days before it was completely overshadowed by another matter. The sector championship was about to begin. What was a sector championship? It was a sector championship that all the universities in Sector B and C and the top 10 universities in the 10 trade sectors would participate in. It included events such as mech combat, gun combat, wrestling, integrated warfare, and so on. It was a gathering of experts and geniuses from all over the world to show off their skills. It was also the most influential competition among the universities every year, and it had a special section on the electronic magazine Gathering of Stars that had over 70 contribution points in the League of Stars. Gathering of Stars was an electronic magazine that specialized in reporting all kinds of competitions. It was the electronic magazine with the highest contribution points in the competitive competition category, and it had a great influence on the entire League of Stars. The importance of this competition could be seen from its special section on Gathering of Stars. Moreover, this competition was closely related to each university's student source in the coming year. If a university did not have any outstanding performance in the sector championship, then who would be willing to enroll? Seven Lights was undoubtedly the beneficiary of this competition. In recent years, Seven Lights had been steadily occupying 5th place, and this was something every Sector B university was jealous of. Why was it that they were jealous of a mere 5th place? It was because the top 4 spots of the Sector Championship were all occupied by the 4 military academies of Sector C. After all, the people of Sector C were all people who had trained their skills through hard work. Therefore, the universities of Sector B would compete for 5th place every year, but most of the time it was occupied by Seven Lights. That was why Seven Lights had the honor and reputation it had today. This was also one of the reasons why so many big families and forces thought of ways to send their children to Seven Lights every year. Seven Lights was like a rich family, and entering this rich family was absolutely beneficial to one's future development. Seven Lights had no lack of descendants of rich families like Lung and Pride, but the ones who truly pushed Seven Lights to the peak were almost all the specially recruited students. Therefore, Seven Lights treated the specially recruited students quite handsomely. Old professors like Mo Hung preferred specially recruited students because they had flashes of ascending to the peak. Recently, the number of people in Seven Lights at the Trade Street and the entertainment Sleepless City had decreased a lot. The training division and the school zone's training rooms were almost full every day, and some people stayed in their dorms all day long to warm up on the Sector Championships combat platform. The Sector Championships combat platform was only opened a month before the Sector Championship, and it would shut down after the Sector Championship. The Sector Championship battle platform had training grounds for all kinds of competitions. Although it was only a virtual area, some training grounds would still be full, and those who wanted to train would have to queue up. In fact, apart from the final integrated battle, which was a real battle, the rest of the Sector Championships matches were all conducted on the Sector Championships battle platform. However, because the sensors would reflect the physical conditions of the contestants onto the platform, the virtual characters on the battle platform were actually not much different from the physical conditions of real people in reality. Therefore, physical training was also a must. There were no special criteria to qualify to participate in the Sector Championship. Students from the 1st to the 4th grade could participate, but those from the 5th, 6th, and 7th grade could not. In reality, they could only be considered as half students. For those who continued to pursue their studies, they were already considered as half professionals, and thus could not participate in the Sector Championship. For example, the military academies in Area C or the universities in the 10 trade zones only had 4 grades. For the sake of fairness, the students of Sector B who are pursuing their studies do not have the right to participate in this tournament. It could be said that Knight had been looking forward to this match for a long time. He was full of ambition, and his heart was set on knocking those people out of the military academy to appease his hatred for not being able to enter the military academy. For the past few days, Knight had almost never left his room. He had set up a special storage cabinet in his bedroom, and he would eat whenever he was hungry. After he was done eating, he would continue to fight on the Sector Championships platform. He even wished he could hug the sensors to sleep. Registering an account on the Sector Championships platform required a 7 Lights card as identification, and each student could only have one account. Therefore, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade students already had accounts, and their accounts would only be erased after graduation. There were no classes scheduled during the Sector Championship, and even if there were classes, Silin could choose not to attend them. His current credits were already enough for him to enter 3rd grade straight away, not to mention that he had Sir Mo Heng's support. The instructors in charge of the class turned a blind eye to Silin's absence. He turned on his microcomputer, put on the sensors, opened the Sector Championships platform, and scanned his 7 Lights card to register his account. The account name Silin entered was Shadow X, and the account name was displayed as usable. After various verifications, the registration was finally displayed as a success, and only a simple introduction was displayed in the Shadow XS information bar. ID, Shadow X Gender, Male Genotype Rank, B School, 7 Lights Battle Information, none other than the ID. The other information was automatically generated based on the 7 Lights card, and they were all real information. Since he had not participated in any competition yet, many of the display bars were blank. After the information was confirmed, a choice of appearance and physique popped up. He could choose to display it as it really was, or he could modify it himself. The initial appearance that popped up was very similar to a kind of housework robot that Mo Hung and the others had created. It looked very common, and there was nothing special about it. However, Mo Hung had always liked to add extra beautification and modification to robots, and Silin was too lazy to do so many unnecessary things. It wouldn't affect his participation in the sector championship anyways. The reason why Silen participated in the sector championship was originally just to see the geniuses from all over the world, and to improve himself from the fights. He didn't think that it was necessary for him to fight for a place. After all, even if he did fight for first place, it would only belong to Silen Duance, and not him. However, Silen had still underestimated the importance people placed on face engineering. When Silen finished registering and officially walked into the sector championships platform, the first thing he heard was, "Fuck. This guy is actually running naked on the sector championships platform." Therefore, the first day Silen entered the sector championships platform, he appeared on the homepage of the sector championships forum, sudden appearance of a naked man. Shadow X had already become known before he had even started a single match. There were even some 7 Light students who accused Shadow X of losing the school's face and tarnishing its reputation. Silen was very speechless. It wasn't like this robot was showing its dick, and it looked just like those anthropomorphic housework robots that usually ran around the streets. Since the system had set up such a generic robot option, then it must have been chosen by someone. Naked my ass. Moreover, whether or not it was tarnishing the school's reputation was earned through fighting, not words. Silen paid no more attention to those bored people. He decided to find someone to spar with first and familiarize himself with platform combat. Coincidentally, there was also a person who had just finished registering and walked out of the newbie area at this time. The person was wearing camouflage clothing, and he told everyone directly that he was from Sector C's military academy. Silen looked at his information. Fong, male, 3rd Military Academy, rank A genotype. Not bad, a good target to practice on. Silen sent a 1v1 challenge request straight away. Fong seemed a little surprised. He was challenged the moment he came out, and it was by a rank B genotype non-military academy student no less. Why did he dare to challenge him, a military academy's rank A genotype? Generally speaking, there were many times when rank B genotype military academy students would tie or even win against non-military academy rank A genotype non-military academy students. It was no wonder that Fong was so surprised. Fong's first reaction was that this kid's brain had gone haywire, but it would be too embarrassing to refuse. After all, this was the first challenge request on the Sector Championships platform. Therefore, Fong pressed the accept button. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.